Welcome to Plato's Cave. I'm Jordan Myers, and I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. You're listening to a reading group episode of the show, which means that in this episode, we continue the free will and moral responsibility series by discussing a 2008 paper by Tamler Sommers called The Objective Attitude. Sommers is actually at the University of Houston as well, so I'm really looking forward to discussing this paper and others with him. And I discussed the paper with three non-philosopher friends, Adam, Giffen, and Brian, because philosophy shouldn't just be for philosophers. So, as I said, we're continuing the responsibility series with this paper, and Brian is now joining us for the series. He was not present for the first part, which introduces a little bit of communication barrier and a little bit of communication issues, but he quickly comes up to speed, I think, on what we've covered in the series before. And this paper is a dive into something that Sommers previously argued, which is that one could inhabit the objective attitude as a ubiquitous state of mind and really lose very minimal from a psychological and moral standpoint. So, as you'll hear, I disagree with this paper, and it's important to note that Sommers himself no longer adheres to this paper. He has changed his view in several episodes of his podcast, A Very Bad Wizards, and also his 2012 paper, Relative Justice. 2012 book. But I really liked this paper, I really liked this episode and this discussion, and I hope you do as well. So with that introduction, please enjoy our conversation of Sommers' The Objective Attitude. Well, we're hopping back into the moral responsibility, and so we're picking back up with The Objective Attitude, which is, I think it's a pretty popularly cited paper by Tamler Sommers. This was published in his early work. I think this was only like the second, third, maybe fourth paper he published. It was very early on in his career. 2007 is when it was published, and I thought it was an excellent paper. And this is good because, you know, Brian, you're joining us for this part. And so, I mean, if there are listeners who are like, you know, joining now that didn't catch some or all of the previous kind of like more responsibility stuff that we've been doing, I think you'll be a good metric for that listener. And like I said before we started recording, obviously feel free to like ask any relevant questions.
Of course.
But this paper is, I mean, we'll get into it, but I thought it's a nice paper in the sense that it's very conceptually tight. He's got like a very nice plan laid out, and the writing is really easy to read. I thought it was just like a good like piece of philosophy. And the 30,000-foot view of the paper is that, you know, the objective attitude has been much maligned, and people are very pessimistic about it in the moral responsibility literature. You know, he cites Thomas Nagel and Susan Wolf about seeing the objective attitude in a really negative view. And he wants to push back against that painting of the objective attitude. And he does so by saying that it can retain a lot of the best things that people believe are exclusive to the reactive attitudes. That's the very, very kind of 30,000-foot view of the paper. Now, we're going to move through it more systematically, but just curious, did anyone have any strong feelings about the paper? Anyone love it or hate it?
Oh, I loved it.
Okay.
I thought it was a very, very good pick, Jordan, on your part to like bring us back in.
Okay, nice. I thought, you know, in hindsight, I didn't actually choose this paper as like a reintroduction one, but in hindsight, I think it works exceptionally well for it.
Yeah, no, not only was it an enjoyable paper regardless of whether this was like a return paper, it's just a good paper, period.
Yeah, I really like the paper, even though I think I suspect, we'll have to see. I suspect that I will be the most mixed bag evaluator of this paper. Because I know that Adam and I talked a tiny bit before this, and you might be the most negative about it, Adam. Have your views changed? I mean, I know that we talked about that before you had actually read the paper, but what did you generally think about it?
I thought it was a good paper, but I think once we actually go through some of the emotions in which he either attempts to argue that one can preserve that emotion in light of the objective attitude, or, you know, kind of jettison that emotion or that attitude, I would say, in light of the objective attitude. I wonder to what extent like he is not combining some of these things. I guess that's really vague. How can I put this without giving things away?
You're wondering if he's importing things that actually can't be imported.
Well, I mean, he addresses that later on too. But
so, Adam, can you just gauge your like agreement with him?
Okay, yeah, that's
just
a
percentage or something.
I would say like 50%.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I quite like this paper. I think it was, I kind of walked away with it because just like the exploration of the objective attitude, because this was educating for me as well, because I didn't read the stuff you guys read before this. I think I kind of came away with like a greater wisdom about life, regardless of how you feel about Frankfurt. Wait, is Frankfurt the author of this one?
No, this is Summers.
This Summers, yeah, Summers, yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that the best parts of this paper probably are what you're referencing, Brian. So let's just get into it. Actually, he opens the paper with like a very nice quote from Thomas Nagel that basically summarizes, and this is from Moral Luck actually, which we did a very long time ago. But I'll just read the whole quote because I think it's instructive. He says, I believe that in a sense the problem has no solution because something in the idea of agency is incompatible with actions being events and people being things. But as the external determinants of what someone has done are gradually exposed in their effect on consequences, character, and choice itself, it becomes gradually clear that actions are events and people things. Eventually, nothing remains that can be ascribed to a responsible self, and we are left with nothing but a portion of the larger sequence of events, which can be deplored or celebrated, but not blamed or praised. So I think that's just a wonderful summary of the fear, as people like Wolff and Nagel would put it, into like this naturalistic deterministic view, right? So if you accept that no one created themselves, essentially, then and no one's really responsible for how events unfold, then like he says, actions become more events and people are things. And so you can either accept that and, as Summers says, take the objective stance, or resist that and continue with the reactive stances. But so he says that, Nagel says that this is a problem without a solution, but Summers disagrees. He says, going into from page 321 to 322, he says, why is this a problem without a solution? It seems to me that this is a problem with a solution. Indeed, the solution indicated by Nagel in this passage. Actions are events and people are things, complex and exciting things, but things nonetheless. So he's essentially, in this paper, biting the bullet in a very positive way. He's trying to put a very positive spin on biting the bullet to taking the objective attitude, and this is important ubiquitously, because even people like Strawson, as we discussed, Strawson admits that obviously we do take both attitudes from time to time, but this is sort of a radical, okay, what happens if you actually just try to accept fully and embody that no one is causa sui, no one's deeply morally responsible? So he says that, so this is the first part we can discuss. So he says there's two reasons for this kind of morose talk about the objective stance. So he says the first reason is that a lot of people deem that the denial of moral responsibility is, quote, dreadful or unacceptable. People don't, it's funny, people don't say it's unsound, but they say it's unacceptable, which is kind of a funny way to deny it. And the second is that this conclusion of the objective stance runs counter to our subjective experience of agency. Now, this is where, so I'm just, maybe I'll save my thoughts for a minute and just ask, what did you think of these two reasons? Do you find each to be kind of equally valid in resisting his conclusion, or do both of, to what extent do you agree with Summers that these reasons just aren't valid? It seems like, Giffen, you might agree with him the most about that.
I think so. I mean, I can't speak for you guys, but I thought they seemed to be. I guess, are you asking me whether I think these are like the main reasons why people resist, like
How
broadly,
valid
like
are?
the public, or just
Well,
the
no.
validity?
For you, how valid do those seem? Those two concerns. I mean, is it? Does the objective stance appear to be kind of dreadful and unacceptable? And do you experience yourself unshakably in an agentic sense?
I think it's I think it's pretty natural to like without like deeper reflection hear the argument about like the lack of robust moral responsibility and find it dreadful. I think that's like natural. If that, I don't know if that answers your question fully, but like I do think that's a natural reaction for people, particularly like us. We like grew up in like the West in a culture that kind of idealizes the idea of free will and personal responsibility. So I think it's totally natural for this argument be met with this dreadfulness, at least at first.
That's true.
And
I mean,
then go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned the West. I'm trying to get I'm blanking on his name. There's one philosopher that's done very interesting work on cultural differences in reactive attitude practices. I think that'd be super interesting.
That would be
trying to get him on the
ridiculously
show.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be very interesting. Sorry, I did. That was just you made me.
No,
think
it's
about
great aside, and we should definitely pursue that. But yeah, no, I think it's a natural response, but like he mentions, I don't know if it's a sound response.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then the second part is like we don't view ourselves in this kind of permanently agentic way, right? And I think it's true. I mean, we get to this like towards the very end of the paper, but I mean, I don't think I've ever met a human being, or will I, that like just truly has detached themselves and views themselves completely agentically as simply nothing more than a thing.
Yeah, I have deep skepticism about whether that is possible. Because like there are just like clearly moments of mental perspicacity where you do just experience yourself as a determined thing in real time. Those just happen. I mean, if you just pay super close attention, you can notice, like I'm doing it right now even a little bit, like you can notice words just kind of spilling out of your mouth almost as they do, right? And it's not even clear, like I don't have anything planned. Things are just kind of like coming out of my mouth, right? So I have two big issues with this paper. And I'm not sure that they'll be the same as maybe what I think Adam's are, but we've arrived at my first one here. My issue with this entire paper, even though I very much liked it, is that I think this entire paper is conflating two different types of responsibility. He talks about, so he calls it, I mean, in the beginning part of the series, we have referred to it as like deep moral responsibility versus shallow. He refers to what he calls robust moral responsibility, or RMR. So this is where I really, really think that he's doing a major conflation here. So last couple sentences, bottom of 322, he says, and since denying moral responsibility requires us to take the objective attitude towards everyone, we should regard skeptical positions with deep suspicion. That is a huge conflation in my mind. So he talks about, it doesn't matter what version of the argument you buy, but you can buy, Dirk Pereboom, Galen Strawson, Thomas Nagel, and this. Like, it doesn't matter, but there's no one made themselves, and no one could have robustly done otherwise, right? Table Frankfurt's objection for a second. But both of those things are true. That, he says that so there's no robust moral responsibility, and then he links that with requiring the objective attitude. I think that those are two different levels of analysis there. So I think that this entire paper is kind of existing between two different planes, right? So if he's talking about how no one's cause a sui, you didn't make yourself or whatever, and that eliminates robust moral responsibility, to then go on and talk about the reactive attitudes is to make a huge jump there, right? Because so if robust moral responsibility is off the table, in my mind, that means that retributive, desert-based retribution is off the table. But it doesn't necessarily mean that reactive attitudes are off the table. Because I mean, so this is going to sound like a little bit weird if you didn't experience or participate or listen to the first part of this, but our entire thing was that there seems to be, or like this is a point that I've been kind of like thinking about for a while, is in all of this literature, there seems to be this conflation between reactive attitudes and extra consequential, like retributive punishment, right? Punishing someone or getting revenge on someone above what that would consequentially produce, maybe deter them, maybe teach them a lesson, make them a better person, something like that, right? So like if all of those reasons aren't valid and you still want to get like deep revenge on someone, that would be like desert-based or retributive punishment. And robust moral responsibility, if that's what he's saying is like the deepest form of moral responsibility, to say that that's off the table, I think directly more addresses the retributive aspects of it. But he goes to the shallower level of reactive attitudes. And I think that that's just a huge leap. So in this paper, he either should have talked about, if he wants to still talk about robust moral responsibility, then the rest of the paper has to be about retribution or revenge punishments, right? But if he wants to talk about the objective stance, then he doesn't have to. I mean, so denying robust moral responsibility is required for taking the objective attitude, but denying robust moral responsibility doesn't entail taking the objective attitude. It just opens the door.
Can I?
Does that critique make any sense?
I think I get what you're saying, but can I just offer like just a quick question just to help clarify your stance, maybe?
Yeah.
Would you agree with like the statement, like since like denying moral responsibility requires us not to take the reactive attitude?
No, denying.
That is a different question slightly.
Does denying RMR require us to not take the reactive attitudes?
Right.
No, I don't think so. Because this goes to like, now this is kind of an idiosyncratic view on my part, I think. But because I believe that these conversations are happening on two different levels, I think denying robust moral responsibility takes retribution off the table. But I don't think it takes the reactive attitudes generally off the table. When a reactive attitude eclipses into retribution, yes, that is off the table. Like I'm kind of viewing this as the reactive attitudes are a large umbrella, right? Because we have to remember they're positive and negative. And there's also a distinction between attitudes and actions, right? So a subset of the reactive attitudes would be reactive actions, and a subset of reactive actions, a very small set, would be about retribution or exacting revenge. I think those are never justified, and those are canceled out by denying robust moral responsibility. But like I don't think that he, like, again, it's weird because I actually don't think a significant portion of what he says about taking the objective stance is wrong, but I think his grounding for it doesn't necessarily, it's not the grounding that he should have gone with. Adam, you were shaking your head yes with my critique. That makes sense to you?
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna kind of say something similar, but not as well as you did earlier on, like with respect to how he kind of opened it up, where he was like, okay, why then do philosophers so often portray the arguments for skepticism about moral responsibility as problems or paradoxes that must be overcome at all costs? And it's like there are two reasons for this: thought to be dreadful or unacceptable, like you said. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Yeah, I don't think those are good reasons for denying,
Of
robust
course.
moral responsibility, but then he just hops right into talking about, not only that here are the implications of adopting the objective attitude, but also he says, like you said, I believe that denying RMR would require us to adopt an exclusive
Yes.
objectivity of attitude. And I'm like, I'm
That
like,
doesn't
what?
follow for me.
He would need to substantiate that. So,
Yes. I totally agree, because I think like I said, I think denying RMR puts the objective attitude on the table. Like, it makes it a very much a live option, right? Because if something like, I don't know, agent causal libertarianism were true about free will, people really did somehow make themselves, and that wasn't an incoherent notion. It's I still wouldn't agree, but it's easier to get to this stance of like, okay, the objective attitude is never appropriate or something, right? But yeah, I mean, in denying RMR, I think you've denied yourself revenge practices, retributive punishment, but it's not clear at all that you've actually denied Strawson's claim.
well, actually, now that I think about his paper in general, I guess like I still have major issues with it, but I mean, he does put forward a case for the objective attitude, and then
Yes.
but hang on, but then he also indicates pieces where it's actually maybe superior to the reactive attitude in adopting the objective attitude. So if you retain the positives of the reactive attitude and then remove the negatives, then we would be obligated to adopt the objective attitude. I just don't think he's demonstrated that,
Yes.
we retained all of, the positives.
And if he was saying that, and if he wanted to say it was based on the denial of RMR, he needs another premise in between there, which is saying denying RMR grants all attitudinal practices under the scope of consequentialism. Then he makes the case that the ubiquitous objective stance is consequentially better. But he doesn't do that. There's that complicated kind of two middle steps there. Right, and I don't think he's done that.
Yeah, it's not explicit.
I don't even think it's implicit, to be honest.
Well, but okay. I mean, I don't want to hop right to the conclusion here, but I mean, he does say like.
Well, here's so
we scroll down here. He's like,
because again, I actually agree with much of the paper after section 2. But I just think that his grounding doesn't necessarily make the most sense.
It's like, the objective attitude should cause a marked, increase in compassion.
What
we no
page?
longer, this would be in the conclusion.
Oh,
Like we no longer,
Jump.
we no longer would view criminals with hatred and deep resentment, desiring punishment well beyond any pragmatic goals that the punishment could achieve. And then but then he says, finally, and perhaps most importantly, I've argued that nothing about the objective attitude precludes feelings of exuberance, love, disapproval, sadness, and many other emotions that add richness and beauty to our lives. So he's saying that the objective attitude eliminates these things that are undesirable in the reactive attitude, but retains the positive bits. So I think he does hint at it, but it's not explicit.
Okay,
I'm really interested to see you guys flesh this out, because I thought it was like pretty compelling. I'm not saying like I'm gonna not budge or anything. I could totally be at the end of this on your guys' side, but just reading it through, I thought it was pretty compelling.
Oh, I did too, but I just disagree with the grounding of it. Because remember, I mean, this, Brian, you won't remember this, but when we were discussing Strawson, either in the Strawson episode or the Watson episode, I don't remember.
Watson, I believe.
I think it might have been
after we
Watson.
clarify what Strawson meant. Watson.
So, my position on reactive and objective attitudes is that, so I would disagree with Early Summers and agree with the part of Strawson that's reasonable, where he says, no, like interpersonal life is constituted by the reactive attitudes. Like if I took the objective stance with respect to all of you all of the time, I think there actually would be something seriously lost there. So I agree with Wolf in that sense.
I honestly, just reading it through, didn't agree with Wolf very much.
Okay, interesting.
But,
well,
yeah,
so let me
questions.
explain. So I wanted to explain because the second objection is about section 2, because after I'm sounding much more negative about this paper than I actually was, because section 1 and 2 was where I had a lot of the issues, and then after that was a lot of positives. So my second issue is very similar to the first, but slightly different. So he says in the second paragraph of section 2, he says, taking the objective attitude commits us only to regarding human beings as creatures who cannot deserve praise or blame. Now, again, that's true, but it's not enough. That's not all the objective attitude is committing you to. Because this is where I think that if he was more explicit in the first section, this would make more sense in the second. Because, okay, so deserve, praise, or blame, right? So deserve, that's absolutely correct. No one can deserve praise or blame because no one is causa sui. No one could have robustly done otherwise, right? But the objective attitude commits you to more than that. Remember, it's because he actually quotes this, and then honestly I think kind of glosses over it. It's degrading someone. Well, degrading is a little bit of question begging, but taking the objective attitude is to change your view of someone from an agent to a thing, right? It's to view someone kind of mechanistically as something to be dealt with in the situation, something to be accounted for. Right? It's a variable that you need to change. And I think that he very much glosses over that very important additional part of the objective attitude. And I think where I disagree with him, it's in that distinction. Because I think that because I think he's absolutely right. He is 1,000% right about everything he says about deserving praise or blame. Right, I'm just 100% on board with him there, but he glosses over what I think is a crucial aspect of the objective stance, and that actually is like I agree with Wolf there that is an alienating part of the objective lens.
But don't you think people are things?
Of course, but there's kind of two levels of do I theoretically think you're a thing? Yes, right? But I'm saying if I truly embody the objective stance towards you all the time, there actually is something phenomenologically lost for me there.
See, to me, it feels like more of a change than a loss.
Okay. A change that is wholly neutral or positive?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if I would say positive. That sounds kind of odd. But at least
well, that's what Summers is saying for sure, right? Sorry, Brian, what were you saying?
I feel like you could view someone from this objective experience and then have different levels of subjectivity added on in there. I think we do that already, like in a lot of workplaces. Like a really healthy workplace is known for instead of like whenever someone fucks up, it's more of like a learning experience and figuring out. So viewing them as an agent that can learn. And so there's this level of objectivity that we already have in our day-to-day lives, and it seems like we're moving that direction based on the history of where we've come from. So I don't think it's too weird. I don't know, when Giffen says change, I kind of agree with him. It's hard to see it go to 100%, but I can see progress in that direction.
You said something there that's super interesting, and it comes into some of the later stuff. So you laid out like a very good example of an action there, right? So, let's say, let's just pretend that, you're a manager and one of your subordinates totally just screws up a project, right? And you're actually like really like you're super mad that this happened. You're not necessarily mad at him yet, right? But you're super angry that this thing happened. Now, so the action, I don't believe is enough to tell us which attitude the supervisor took, because you could be super mad that this thing happened, but actually this is the other maybe difference between me and Summers. I think that the objective attitude is a much more cognitive stance than he's taking. Like I think it's a very consciously evaluative stance. So if I were to take the objective stance toward a subordinate who had messed up, and I say, okay, I can just fly off the handle, I can chastise him or whatever, but that's just going to alienate him. Like, he's never going to try to do anything again, right? It's actually just better for everyone involved if I try to show him what's wrong, try to like teach him, how to do things better, right? That is the objective stance.
That doesn't even seem like necessarily the objective stance.
Well, explicitly because so in that I am viewing him as a variable there. If I do this action, he will respond in this way, and it will create worse outcomes, right? That seems to be very kind of mechanistic.
I don't know. I feel like that specific description, like you could probably still view someone as an agent in that case. Just you're kind of like taking a consequentialist lens of like the scenario, right?
But your action there is wholly determined. Your action there has nothing to do with if they're an agent or not. Your action seems to be explicitly grounded in whether this will create good consequences in them or not. But how? Okay, so if that's not
I want to get like a little more details like on Brian's example, because I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
So Brian, like, like in this scenario that you were thinking of, like how removed is the person from like that has that mindset of just recognizing that a new employee, like say, like comes in and then makes a mistake. Like, how removed is that person with that attitude of that employee? Does that make sense? Like, is this like the direct boss that has that attitude?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of just a good attitude to have in general for anyone that's on a team, because it's like you could also be part of a team and have to make a decision as a team.
Yes,
on that individual. But.
So, do you think like that's like more of like a workplace thing where you can view kind of colleagues as, objects and almost, just things to be manipulated one way or the other, where it's like, okay, I don't really have any deep interpersonal relationship with this person necessarily, but I recognize that they're going to do good things, they'll do bad things. I need to view them as just, not as an agent per se, but just as kind of like a cog in the machine here and how they're functioning.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is you could take that, like the action there could be the same, but it could be from either stance, right? Like if you imagine that your boss is a super empathetic person and they just naturally react in that way, they actually like, they're super angry that this thing happened, but that actually just naturally sides, and they actually just, it's not like a very cognitive appraisal by them. It's kind of just their reaction almost, like the reactive attitudes imply. And they teach you, like, oh, like Brian, like, I know you were trying to do like a super productive thing here, but, you kind of went wrong in these few ways. But I'm not blaming you or anything, but I just want to like teach you. And that's kind of their initial reaction. That seems to be a very reactive stance. So the same action. Wait, I'm just trying to make the point that this
is that reactive. That sounded kind of objective.
No. Wait, that sounded objective, but my first example didn't. Where they viewed them as like a mechanism almost.
Well, both sounded objective to me, to be fair.
No, both sounded objective to me. I was asking you clarifying questions earlier, just because I was unsure about like what the bounds were between like what an objective attitude.
No, you don't. You wouldn't. Taking the reactive attitudes doesn't imply that you actually get angry with them. Your reactive attitudes could be one of like, oh, this person needs help. Like, let me help them, right? Like we tend to valence reactive attitudes negatively, but they're positive or negative.
Yeah, no, but yours just sounded indistinguishable. Like you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was reactive or objective. You know what I mean? It could have been someone that was like,
Okay, I'm sorry. So
I want a definitive example of like a reactive attitude that maybe doesn't go through the stereotypes that Jordan you think is normally imparted on them.
Just like a positive reactive attitude?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, Strawson mentions a bunch. Like Summers mentions being like proud, right? Like there's almost like this kind of superiority to it. Like you actually kind of it's not clear on whether you actually think people could have like just chosen to be as good as you or not, right? But there's this sort of like self, right? There's just like this very kind of like arrogant superiority, and that it's positive-esque from like your own perspective,
Right. I see what you're saying there.
Yeah. So all I was trying to point out there is that it's not clear whether so you could have the same action, and from an external perspective, that action could be congruent with both the objective and reactive stance. Right? Like if you see someone do something, you actually don't know if they've done it for the objective stance or the reactive stance. There's probably really good context clues, right? Like if someone flies off the handle and just starts yelling, it could be this like calculated plan, right? Like it could be
just a deep consequentialist calculation.
Exactly. Like it could be, but it's probably not.
Are you just making the distinction that like the motivation of why you do something is what drives if it's are you just making that distinction? Like someone could be like, oh yes, I'm going to do this for my own health or whatever, and
well, it's kind of like
ultimately
the difference is like he's kind of distinguishing between action and attitude in this case.
Okay.
So it's like different attitudes can lead to
True.
the same actions
because
Yeah.
they
So,
often overlap. I think they're very correlated, but they are distinguishable. And my issue, I think like my main issue with the paper is that he like some early Summers does gloss over that very cognitive part of the objective stance. Like I think to take the objective stance is to do this very kind of algebraic calculation about like someone with respect to certain inputs that you can provide and what outputs that would create from them. And I just think that he really does gloss over that part of the objective stance.
I think it manifests often as like a calculation kind of thing. I'm not sure if it's a necessity though that the objective stance turns out that way. If it's strictly like
if it's just what he's saying, then if it's just that people can't deserve praise or blame, that's indistinguishable from basically just like retributivism. But I think just like conceptually, there's just more to this debate than that, right? Like retributivism can either be on the table or not, and then there's also a question of like what attitudes are appropriate in which circumstances.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel kind of more in line with him about like the.
Well, I'm not saying that a lot of his conclusions are wrong. Like I'm definitely not saying that. I don't know, Adam, is what I'm saying making sense?
No, I mean, I'm completely on your side with this. It's just like, I'm just trying to think like what this conversation would even be like if we were adopting like the objective attitude, right? Where it's just like.
That's a good thought experiment.
Yeah. It's just like, you and Giffen are disagreeing right now, but like there's no sense of irritation or anything, but it's more of just like.
But because I'm actually just not irritated.
Yeah, no, you're just recognizing the other entity is just like, is you might just be a little dismayed that this person is thinking this way right now, but it would just it just really changes like human dynamics in such a way that I don't buy into it entirely.
If you want a real example,
sure.
So right now,
are we allowed to record this?
No, it's a real example from just a past episode.
Of course.
So like right now, like we're disagreeing, but I'm taking like a very kind of happy reactive stance, right? Like we're just like, I'm not saying things to kind of like try to, in a way, I'm trying to get you to see my point, but I'm not calculating what words can I kind of put together to get him. It's kind of the difference between persuasion.
I expect more effort, Jordan.
Well, it's kind of it's almost embodied in the difference between persuasion versus manipulation, right? Like I'm trying to persuade you, but I'm not necessarily trying to manipulate you.
To me, I feel like that difference would be more of like, do you want me to understand or do you want me to like get me to say yes? Like that would be the difference between manipulation and persuasion.
Sure.
Whereas I think an honest persuasion would be calculated.
I'm
thinking like genuinely
That's
about
like
how best to convey my feelings about like what I'm like how when I read through the paper and like what I'm confused on. And like, I guess that would put me in the objective frame right now. So
Mm.
Adam, to answer your question about what it would be like if we took the objective stance, it would be exactly like it is now, at least between like me.
Really? See, I'm totally so here's an
Yeah,
an
it's like an
example.
intellectually kind of oriented like show. So I am like, I read the paper.
Let
and
me
then
give you
I
an
read-
example that like cuts through this distinction nicely.
Yeah.
So right now, Giffen, we're like, this is fun to like, kind of disagree and do a bit of conceptual analysis, right?
Yeah.
I'm viewing you with the reactive stance right now. I'm just allowing my natural reactions to just manifest themselves, and I'm not kind of filtering them through a consequentialist reasoning, right? Now, when we were talking about consciousness, towards the end of that, I did actually view you in the objective stance. Like I just viewed you as someone who was not actually open to anything I was saying. And so by the end of those episodes, like I just stopped actually trying to, like I didn't have like the reactive stances, but up until that point I did.
Are you
So I was
trying to
getting, like,
provoke Given's reactive attitude
no,
right now?
no, I'm actually not. Like I'm trying to
No,
say
Jordan, I think
before
that's
that,
totally fair.
like I was getting angry with you, like frustrated, like why can't you just like see what I'm
Yeah,
talking
but the thing is,
about?
I'm not
Jordan?
really like bothered by the fact that you took the objective attitude there.
No, I'm not saying that you need to be, because I think that was an example where it was in fact appropriate. But I'm saying, like in my mind, there was actually something that degraded your status. Like when I did that, like I no longer viewed you as agentic. Now, you were never deserving in a deep sense of praise or blame in either sense, right? But when I switched. But when I switched to the objective stance, like I very much viewed you as a variable in the situation.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
And I can see how that can be a degradation in a sense. But upon reflection, to be honest, I don't know if it is. Like, I mean, you said like you started treating me less agentically, but I mean, as you mentioned, I don't have agency whether or not you
Yes.
projected it onto me.
Yes, that's true. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the reactive, when we're undertaking the reactive attitudes, we're kind of acting as if people have agency, for lack of a better term, right? Like we're just allowing our natural evolutionarily
Yeah,
built,
cognitively programmed to be
It's
kind of
precognitive.
inclined towards
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah. You were
I'm-
born,
but I'll
and
let
it's
this-
not like you start reflecting on the agency of your surroundings. It's
Yeah.
very natural, and this is a combination of like genetic and psychological and cultural.
So,
But it's very
yeah.
deep. I
So
would think we both
I'll,
would agree there.
I'll shut up about this point, but just to like kind of cap it off. So those
Yeah.
are the two aspects of the reactive attitude that I think Summers misses, and that I think
Which two?
does.
sorry.
So the viewing someone as something to be kind of accounted for, right? And then the fact that it's a very cognitive task. Like I think that those two things he misses, and that is why
But-
I am not
Okay.
sure everything comes along.
No, that's really good. Actually, I'm going to make a note of that. So it's
I also have one too.
cognizant action.
Cognitive.
It's
like a
cognitive to
cognitive
take the
task.
objective stance, is what you're saying.
Yes, more cognitive than the reactive attitudes.
And then the second one was actually I did this in reverse order. The
Yeah.
other one was that you kind of
He
change
misses totally that someone becomes a variable, like a mechanistic detail of it, because the deserving of
Okay.
praise or blame, that's just true whether you like you deny robust moral responsibility, sure, but that remember we were like that's the deeper end of the pool, right?
see. Okay, this is actually really good and clarifying. And I think I have like a natural like a let me rephrase that. I thought of some comments on these 2 points as you were like saying them and as I was writing them. But I think Adam had a question first, so I'll let him.
Well, no,
go.
I'm just gonna add one more critique of mine to that list. There is just
Sure.
that, and it's actually very similar to the ones Jordan just gave, but I
A little
think
plagiarism never hurts.
well, it's slightly different, but it's that
This is the joke.
he kind of brushes aside the idea that the objective attitude distances ourselves from others,
Mm.
and I think it's evident in his language when we examine, like
Okay, that's a good one.
yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I think, and Brian, do you have a comment on that as well?
Well,
Or
I
do
had
you
more
have
of a-
agree with
I
me?
had a more, I had I had more of a question. So, is the question more in this paper more about ought we move to the objective attitude, or could we move to the objective attitude? And I'm
Both.
wondering. Okay, yeah, it's both.
Yeah.
Right. So if ought, then could. So would you say, Jordan, that you would say humans would never be able to given infinite time the objective attitude?
No, actually, so I was very much persuaded, or at least more open to it, with his last section, Joshua's Journey. Like that actually, that
was a great
really,
section.
That was a great section. That very much persuaded me to the possibility of it.
Okay.
Because, like, Brian, your question is basically, do you believe that Buddhist monks are lying about their experience or not, right? Like, if you claim to be kind of fully enlightened, you are kind of you're claiming that you view yourself and others always and in totality under the objective stance almost, right? Like,
So, Jordan, I'm
that
just
could be
curious
possible,
then,
it could not be, yeah, I don't know.
do you think that, like, the monks were able to, even if it's not like a permanent state until their death, like just for like a period of time, really just completely took that objective lens?
Well, it depends what you mean by period of time, because like I've really, really embodied the objective stance, but not for like a whole day, not even for like a whole hour.
Well,
But,
I mean,
like,
did you
know
do
what
it?
I mean?
So I'm tying this back to one of your points here. Was it
Mhm.
cognitive when you were in this mode?
Extremely.
It was extremely cognitive. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. But what about like the example you gave earlier? You kind of like were just talking as like the host, and you were reflecting on the fact that you kind of were doing things mechanistically.
Yeah, you can witness yourself from time to time doing that. Yeah.
You're right, but that seems to be like until you reflected on it, it was like a kind of mechanistic, non-cognitive objective frame that you were taking. Is that sound fair?
No, I was saying that you can actually notice that in real time. Like it's not necessarily just upon reflection.
No, I guess my point was more so you mentioned that the fact that it's a cognitive task that you need to kind of think about to take the objective frame. But I thought you were giving an example earlier where you weren't thinking about it and you just kind of like as time passed, you kind of reflected back and were like, oh, I think I was without consciously thinking about it in the objective frame. Do you see my point, or does anyone see my point here?
I think he was just commenting on just like the I don't know. This kind of just went back to
the
like
subjective agency point.
Yeah, just kind of just noticing like the mechanistic nature of like himself. But I think like even like Summers like mentions in the paper here that our intuition is actually to adopt the subjective attitude. So you pretty much have to like rewire your brain.
No, my point was, did Jordan experience an instance where he kind of reflectively went into the objective attitude without it being a conscious kind of calculation on his part?
Reflectively? No, I mean, I think you do have to like. Sounds
like
weird.
Basically, my point was you were in the act
it.
and you were treating yourself. It seemed like non-agentically, and then like you said, and I'm realizing it now. A second ago, I was kind of just like naturally.
No. I think you're for some reason you're focusing on like the second ago. I'm saying no. You can experience it in real time. Is that
experience what in the real time?
Just the fact that you have no idea where anything comes from. Like it's all just out of the void.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to kind of
I'm very confused about the point that you're trying to get to. I'll be honest.
Okay, so you said like one of the things that he missed in the paper was the fact that it's a cognitive task to kind of take the objective attitude.
Yeah.
And I'm saying it's not necessarily a cognitive task because sometimes it can be done completely unconsciously.
No, you're missing the fact that I said it wasn't unconscious. Like if I'm actually trying to just witness like that non-agentic character of my experience, it is kind of something that you have to like. Let me just focus on this for a second. So that is like,
not necessarily though. Like exactly. We've discussed cases, like a child or just like someone whose past is just so abhorrent that we recognize we view them objectively, and that's not necessarily like
Yeah. So my point is basically, is it a non-zero kind of situation?
Giffen,
it
I think you're
physically
glossing over the fact that the subjective agency was what I was saying was one aspect of the objective attitude, but he's missing the other aspect. So yeah, that one aspect can kind of cross over, but
I don't know what you mean by like that one aspect.
I think we should move on from this point because like it's not. I don't think it's actually central to the paper. But he's just saying that one reason why people resist taking the objective attitude in its totality is because it runs counter to our subjective experience, right?
Sure.
And I'm just saying that that's a bad reason to resist it, because you don't necessarily have to have that subjective experience, but you could just it comes apart from the objective stance, especially with respect to other people, which I think is the main kind of thrust of this, right? Like you can be like very mindful of the fact that you're just like erupting in anger at someone, right? But that would still be the reactive attitudes, like with respect to other people. You would just be like very kind of oddly noticing every intonation of that experience yourself.
I think I get what you were saying about that point, but I thought I was kind of on a relevant trail with your like comment, but we can move past it. That's okay.
Giffen. But like before we move past it, give like one more statement there of like what you think Jordan was trying to say, because no,
that's fine. I could totally be off base here. I thought Jordan had said that one of the things that he faulted Sommers here was the fact that he ignores the fact that the objective attitude is one that is by necessity cognitive.
There's a cognitive load that is associated with it.
Yes. And my point was, I don't agree with that statement because I think it is not necessarily cognitive.
There's some like do you mean that there are instances where it's not necessarily cognitive, or all the time? Because like he's arguing,
no, literally
like
there is.
I'll grant you what you're looking for.
Instance.
Actually, Giffen, I think you can kind of be pre-committal to certain objective like stances. I do think you can do that.
Okay, so that makes I think we broke through the concern here, because all I was trying to address was I think that it is not necessarily cognitive.
There was a much easier way to get that out of me. Yeah,
well,
like
I clearly just didn't take that path then, so I apologize.
I'll suspend reactivity towards you. No,
like I suspended.
Like I think yeah, like you can totally like I do this. Like you can kind of pre-commit to be very objective with respect to like certain people in certain situations.
To the point that it's like as natural as like walking, no cognitive load.
Even
if in moments, it just needs to be a non-zero thing that I want to get from you.
Well, see, this is why I think so. Again, I think that you're kind of reading a lot of disagreement into me with the latter parts of the paper because I'm disagreeing with the grounding. Like I actually love the rest of the paper. Like I think that his whole thing with the analogy he draws with like someone becoming an atheist is totally valid. Like
I don't think that you thought that it wasn't. I was just specifically focusing on the comments that you gave, which were very clarifying for me about like your problems with like his. I guess it would be kind of like the foundational aspects. I was just trying to clarify that because to me, there's a huge difference between thinking that the objective attitude necessitates a cognitive load versus often requires a cognitive load. There's a big difference to me for that.
I think it very often requires a large cognitive load.
I would agree with you even.
Here's what I'm not sure about. Is the objective attitude always a higher, so I'm making just a comparative claim, is the objective attitude always a higher cognitive load than the reactive attitudes? That's a question that I don't know what I think about.
I think it would be no, it's not always higher. And I think you almost gave an example where like you just kind of programmed yourself or you were programmed by your environment to react into that frame. So we were heavily biased towards the reactive attitude, and like the cognitive load is very clear often to get to the objective attitude. My claim that I just wanted to get and see if you agreed with or not was, is it necessarily the case?
This is actually super interesting. So this is a real problem kind of for
like
me
one that's
is because
discussed, or you mean like for
me, yeah. So like I actually kind of wish that he was more right about his thesis than he is. At least maybe like this is maybe just a me issue, but So there are like, let's just say that there's kind of a certain, like there are certain people in my life which I find myself, uh, it would be just more moral for everyone involved if I was actually able to take the objective stance, right? Like everyone would be better off. And a lot of the time, I am very successful in having like a pre-commitment to doing it. But the times that I mess up, it's because the reactive attitudes just escape almost, right? Like you can't catch them before they're out. So that's why I am not sure that the objective attitude is not always
Okay. No, that's actually great. So I think you finally understand, and I finally understand, like the point of this discussion, or well, not the whole discussion, but like this point that I was harping on is to me, I think there are some consequences to the fact that it's not necessarily cognitive, but just
like I wish
proportionally.
I wish I actually could just get into the like objective stance much more absolutely from time to time.
Yeah,
like
okay.
I honestly wish I could.
I don't know, Adam and Brian, do you guys think it's necessarily like I'll get the same thing I like answered to Jordan. Are you unsure about like whether it's like a higher load necessarily to take the objective stance compared to the reactive? Like that there's just like an absolute?
I mean, I guess Oh, Brian, do you want to go first or me?
Well, yeah. What do you mean? So when you say like the higher load, do you say it's like?
Does it take more? Does it always take more brain power in a situation to take the objective attitude versus the reactive? And like the obvious thing here is like clearly proportionally, if you go into the reactive attitude and then you have to kind of will yourself and like explain to yourself to take the objective attitude to be like the better option. But I'm saying I don't think that's always the case.
Well,
no, I don't.
Guess, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't.
Go ahead.
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's always the case. I agree with that, but it's overwhelmingly the case.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
But the fact that it is the case in some aspects, I think, informs that we can change in those aspects, and it's just a matter of how much we can change in those aspects. So.
Okay, I think that this might be a good point of further discussion later, because I'm not sure, Jordan, if we agree or not yet.
I'm almost sort of wishing I did agree with you more. Maybe I don't know. We'll have to see.
You wish for my blissful ignorance.
Well, it's like I just find myself like when I do like because many times I do successfully just embody the objective stance, right? And I actually think that most people, whether they realize it or not, are basically doing it. At least once a day, probably. Like, right? This is just almost what it means to kind of deal with someone, right? Like,
yeah. If maybe you deal with someone every day, and it's just like the reactive kind of like good morning. It's like you aren't really viewing like interested in their kind of inner epic that they're living. It's just like I have a responsibility socially to say good morning to this person, and then have at least a non-angry demeanor, and then you pass by.
It's essentially the same thing as just avoiding walking into the water cooler, right? Like,
So I think, are we comfortable clarifying that as kind of an example where like the cognitive load would actually be higher to take like the reactive stance, where you're just like kind of deeply viewing them as an agent, just because it's so natural to just kind of like pass them by.
So this is just probably like a case-by-case person, but the thing that I'm worried about is, so I don't know what role potentiality plays in this claim by Summers. So if I have successfully kind of, just really my natural reaction is the objective stance with respect to someone at work, say,
anything,
right?
Yeah.
Let's just choose that, right? So I'm worried that if that person were to bring up something that I would be embarrassed of, right? Like to become embarrassed in front of someone is a very reactive attitude, right? I'm thinking about like, so if you always were kind of like you had habituated yourself to the objective stance, but if that person were to just like, oh, I heard X about you or whatever, that thing is like very embarrassing, right? And if they did that, then I would just really be reactive about that. I don't know. So would that be to?
I don't know. I mean, I think
I don't
if
know.
you were-
Like, you-
I think if you were to view this person like as an object for like weeks on end, and then they suddenly bring up something like you probably wouldn't give a damn what they think. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think I
Maybe
still
The
stand
dirt
by
has
what-
made me aware that I have big
Dirt.
feet or something, marginal.
Yeah,
like
whatever.
that.
Well, no,
know,
but like the point I'm trying to make though is like I still agree with like your initial point that I do think there's like a degrading aspect to keeping the objective attitude, at least for an extended period of time of someone.
Mhm.
So it's like, why would you care? Like what that person would say to you after like, a
Right.
week of just viewing them as an object to deal with.
Well, actually, an interesting point is embarrassment is kind of a self-centered one, so it's where you're viewing yourself as an agent almost, I think. Where it's
no,
like,
not really.
well, if it's an interesting like fact by yourself, it might be something that like reflects poorly on you as if you were an agent.
But to be fair, you wouldn't. You only feel that way because it's with respect to another person bringing it up. Like,
Okay, maybe in some cases, actually, embarrassment is like outward, but I also think it could be inward.
yeah, because
Actually, yeah, no, I'll take that back entirely. It could be either. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily inward.
Because I think the point is illustrated by just like if that like factoid that was like embarrassing was just printed off of like you just like go to the printer and that fact about you is just printed off on a sheet of paper. The only reason you'd actually be concerned is because you would think that would have been printed by another person. You're not actually concerned that it's just like on the paper spit out by this machine.
Well, sure. There might be some sort of like, if you think about it, it's like if it was like a event that reflects poorly on you, it could be
Sure.
something like towards yourself. But I think, yeah, at the very least, it definitely has a social element, especially in this case. So that was my bad for bringing that up.
Yeah.
But-
Maybe I'm softening a little bit on. I think it's definitely because I'm thinking about just myself, and I think
Yeah.
that it's very true to say that I have made a pre-commitment to take the objective stance with certain people in certain situations,
Yeah.
and maybe that pre-commitment itself is an extremely cognitive load or cognitive task. But then I can kind of habituate myself into it not being a cognitive task.
Right. So in like the instance itself, it would be lower than the reactive attitude in the cognitive task.
Yes.
But it
And
would maybe necessitate all of the orientation.
And I think that is easier in a directly proportional relationship to how distant or kind of removed or inconsequential that person is to you. Right? Like it's probably way easier to take the objective stance towards just some random like coworker in another department.
Totally.
And it's probably like a little bit less easy to take it with respect to like a new friend and you're like playing pickup sports or something and they like foul you hard, then it's like you just walk it back. It's just more and more hard. Like probably like a romantic partner is the hardest.
Yeah.
Version.
Wife and best friend of like 50 years,
What do
just like an impossibly high.
Yeah, exactly.
Adam
What are you
Stark.
What are you laughing about?
Adam's
Oh, no,
got a
I'm-
laugh. Has
no,
he
I'm
been
just-
failing
I'm-
you in badminton?
I don't think I strive to take the reactive attitudes in all manners.
No, I'm just thinking if Giffen's still hanging out in the objective attitude, how can we bring it out? How can we bring him back to the reactive here? What?
Okay, let's not make this a game show. I do think that might
what
be a
could be
worthy.
said to?
It might be a worthy thought experiment, but let's not use that frame. Just like egging me on.
No, of course not. I'm just that's
No,
just
it's
why
an
I was
interesting
smiling.
thing. It's like I
Yeah.
don't know that it's necessarily degrading. I don't know if I share that view about like taking the objective attitude towards people.
Don't confuse degrading with immoral. I'm not necessarily saying like because obviously, as you know, I think the objective stance is very
Okay,
often the moral
A
one.
great clarifying point, Jordan.
Yeah.
So you think the degradation then could be amoral?
No, I think it could even be moral. Like I think that I'm actually working on a paper right now for like this conference that I'm working on.
Moral degradation, but in like a deeply personal sense.
yeah. It's just
You have a moral obligation to degrade everyone who comes into your path.
it's just like it just goes well beyond the objective stance. It's just like It's just like, how can you just
I
degrade
center my entire universe around this one fact.
it
George
actually
just
involves
spills it out.
It actually involves strong reactive attitudes. Like,
Sorry, that was kind of funny.
No,
But you
it's
work on
fine.
a paper right now specifically talking about like the amorality of.
know the morality of it. So I think that in certain circumstances, the objective attitude is actually morally required, even at the
Yeah.
cost of degrading the person's like the individual's status of personhood in your mind.
Okay, no, I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
That sounds cool, like a cool paper actually.
I think it would be a very cool paper.
If the degradation it doesn't have a moral element, then, or if it could be either amoral or moral, then I'm not sure if
Well, can I
that
clarify?
matters as much at that point.
No, it does. The way you phrased it, I wouldn't agree with.
Oh, that's easily
So,
a problem on my end.
I'm not saying that it just like kind of comes out in the wash. Like it's just it's a moral. I'm saying it's actually like deeply. It can be deeply moral. Like a real moral imperative to take the objective stance in some situations.
Yeah, even at the kind of social degradation of the other person.
Not even social, just like
Oh, well, the
experiential or like directly to you, right?
Okay.
Like
even if it
so
makes
like
you feel like you're degrading them.
yes. So
Okay.
one of the instances.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So one of the instances is if you have a you could imagine like you have a very asymmetrical kind of dependent relationship with someone, maybe temporarily, right?
Okay.
It's hard to bring up a good example. It's not a little betraying here. Say
Betray me. It's okay.
no. That was not my concern.
Betray me.
Degrade me, betray.
Degrade me in public, Jordan. It's the moral thing to do. This is some strange
say-
gaslighting.
let's say like there's a person who is temporarily dependent on another person in a way that is not, it's like the arrangement of the dependency is not itself immoral, right? So there's no kind of background ethical qualms.
Like a physical or emotional dependency kind of thing.
But yeah, physical or like maybe even like monetary or something, because emotional is a little too valenced. Something.
Okay,
like
yeah,
that.
sure.
And the person that they're dependent on is someone with whom they can't actually take the objective stances, right? But if they were to just totally remove themselves from this situation, both parties might be worse off. But because of the dynamics of that relationship, to remain in that situation requires taking the objective stance towards that other person, even at the cost of degrading that person's status for you. And I'm basically arguing that it's outweighed on a consequentialist basis just because of the A, results in the other person, but B, tangential results for you.
That's actually pretty interesting because I'm like coming to the realization, and like this can be, critiqued by you guys, but I'm like, I really don't know if I view, like have that same sense of kind of degradation, even after you clarify that's not like a moral claim.
I clarified it is a moral claim. Why do you keep saying it's not?
Sorry, I mean like it's not immoral to do.
Oh, okay.
I was not clarifying. Sorry, my mind. I'm like trying to be careful, but
I had a bit of reactivity towards you. I was genuinely annoyed.
understandable. What I mean is, like, you clarified that it's not an immoral claim you're making about the degradation.
Yeah.
So it's either moral or, neutral.
So, like, I'm just curious when you. I think that this tends to correlate with like what we would consider our best relationships, right? Like if you think of kind of like just the best relationships you have with people,
Sure.
I feel like those relationships are ones where you can really just let down kind of filters or guards. Now,
Yeah.
You're very helplessly reactive with people.
You can be emotionally vulnerable, things like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
If that specifically for you, I guess you could do that. And And so,
Just to
like,
clarify the magnitude of like the closeness of the
No,
relationship.
yeah, I was just trying to make a joke. Yeah, but like you're like you're honest in a way that's not calculated. Like there's not a valence of everything is passing through like this
The
consequential
social filter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe
and-
not strictly social, but I know
Well,
what you're saying.
I'm just
And I'm-
thinking like of like Jordan's annoyance right there. Like,
Yeah.
I guess for me, Giffen, like, what's
Yeah.
the distinction you make between like Jordan's annoyance under like a reactive attitude versus like, you know, an objective attitude?
Good
because like okay, I actually want to hear you answer that first. If you need like a, you know, clarifying question, ask it.
Well, I guess I am never sure which one it is.
Wait,
no, but
even for-
okay, no, but like what I mean is like from the objective attitude, like
Yeah.
it wouldn't really be like directed annoyance in the sense that like Jordan would just be like if he was viewing you through like the objective lens at that point,
Yeah.
he's not annoyed necessarily about like
My
you
choices.
as an agent deciding to make that comment.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was more of just like
that the comment
him-
was made.
yeah, the comment
I'm
was
annoyed about the
made.
situation I've immediately been placed into.
Exactly. So it's like
Yeah.
that's a very big perspective shift there.
Wait, real quick. And what's more than that, I would be negatively responding to you in order to get you to change or something like that. It wouldn't just be my reaction. Sorry, now answer.
I don't. Well, again, part of this does require me having like knowledge of, what perspective Jordan's taking. But I'm not sure I'm too bothered by if he took the objective attitude.
No, that's not. I don't think that was the question.
No, but okay, but
clarify.
say you were like annoyed at me, Giffen, like
Yeah.
like what, and you were totally embodying the objective attitude. What would that look like? I just want to hear what that would look like.
I honestly am trying to reflect. This is like me trying to remember instances where there could be like a very similar situation where I took, either or. And I'm not sure what the difference would be terribly, specifically with respect to like viewing them as an agent. Because I'm
That's
imagining.
kind of a weird. Well, then what's the like? In what it seems like you
'Cause, like,
can't
I
really
honestly-
agree with Summers that much if there's not a whole lot
Well,
of difference.
What was the case you brought up, Adam? Maybe I want to see if I can answer that.
Yeah, so
Let's hear Brian's perspective.
yeah, just because like if you were annoyed at me, Brian, like I made some comment on the podcast you thought was either moronic or insensitive or something like that, right? So if just like when
What would be the objective answer?
yeah, but like how would you actually distinguish that? Because I think Jordan and I have like laid out like maybe not like a perfect idea of like what the objective attitude is, but are you seeing it differently? Like what would that look
Okay,
like for you?
Let's decompose the scenario then. So we have the event, which is you saying something terrible, and you
Sure.
are the thing that is doing that action. So in that case, I would probably assume that it's based off of ignorance. So you don't understand something, you don't know something. So then I would probably tell you why the thing that I think you don't know, and hope that informs you not doing it in the future.
But notice like the subtle perspective shift there, where it's like, the actions there I'm not as concerned with, like because those could just be consequentialist at that point. You're just trying to kind of like direct my behavior in that sense. But like the attitudinal shift for me is like, okay, I'm annoyed at him, but versus the objective, which is sort of like I'm just annoyed that he is the way he is. I'm annoyed that that he said what he did, but not because he's an agent that decided to say it, but rather because he is just a thing that said this.
Right,
Yeah,
you're upset with the event.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's not how we should view things?
I think it does distance us in the sense that like you're no longer upset with me. You're upset with almost like the entire environment that created me. You know what I mean?
I think there's a truth
So-
to that though.
Yeah, but it's
what
a shift.
proportion
though.
of the time do you find yourself taking these stances? Because I think I know what you're getting at. Like, to answer your question, if I'm imagining myself taking a reactive attitude, like in the moment, I'm not being like the kind of like self-reflective or just generally reflective person. Maybe like whatever, my guard's down or something like that. I would probably react with like anger, or like like just critique or yelling, something like that, right?
Yeah.
but I find myself like most of the time just like able to like self-reflect in a situation where like interpersonally where I like am thinking, and this is an instance where you're describing where it's like a kind of a negative thing that happens and how I react.
Sure.
Okay.
But I like usually probably do go through the same. It was similar to what Brian was describing. Is like I am kind of viewing the variables here. I view variables all the time.
Okay.
But I guess I mean
complex
do you
variables.
Just to
like
note.
do you like with like positive aspects though? Like I kind of want to like flip it a little bit just
Oh,
to
yeah.
kind of just mix it up. Like, you know, say all four of us met up, and you know, I don't know. I mean, this would be uncharacteristically kind of me once again, but
Okay, I like this thought experiment.
He actually just doesn't even have to give any details. It's
Yeah.
just him being
Adam's
uncharacteristic.
firmly in
Yeah,
fantasy
exactly.
land.
Adam
No,
does something uncharacteristically
it's
kind.
just like
so
I
anything
somehow
kind.
I somehow reached out like a week before or whatever, and like kind of got an idea of like what everyone's beers, like what they liked, right? So like I picked them all up and, you know, brought like a whole case of just like drinks that people like, you know,
Yeah.
Giffens, you know, the seltzers that you like, or
You
or
were
whatever.
thoughtful to bring something specifically for me if I don't drink alcohol,
Exactly.
which
Yeah.
is
So
a great matter of like foresight on your part, and I greatly would appreciate that.
sure. So I've
I'm
done
a man
something.
of
I've
God.
done.
I won't drink alcohol.
Wait a minute, wait a
because
minute,
Yeah.
of
Well,
blood
but
of Christ.
Hold on,
let
Adam.
me actually. Okay. Go ahead, Jordan.
Did you hear what? So, Giffen, I think when you said, and I would greatly appreciate that, that was a very reactive thing that you said.
Is it?
Well, we'll get into that, but it depends on the valence of it.
I mean, I can be appreciative of, you know, the
but you said it. But I don't know. I don't want to mind read, but the
No.
the kind of you. I think in that moment were very grateful to him. You weren't necessarily grateful that a chain of events happened wherein you ended up with a seltzer.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the,
I- actually,
I can be
there's like a
appreciative of
keyword.
Adam. I think I can be appreciative of Adam as a non-agent, though, just as a very incredibly complex thing.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
But
isn't
like
that
I really want to focus on one word though. Got to focus on one word because I think Jordan pointed it out here that
Sure.
it's really directed where
Sure.
it's, you know, appreciative, you know, of me, or rather than, you know, appreciative to me.
I
You know what I
literally
mean?
have
It's
that in
of
Adam.
or to. So it's like I really do think it's, you know, the objective attitude is like, you know, really well named actually in a sense where it's, you know,
Appreciative to.
I have that exact.
You actually
note.
do have that note. Damn.
yeah, no, but I do think that, you know, verbally that it's
I
not,
don't know if I've ever said appreciative to something.
Well, yeah, but it's an awkward phrase. Like that would.
Yeah, I'm just not curious what the difference is then.
Yeah, no, but it's just like, you know, I appreciated that you did this, not I appreciate that you are
This
the way
was-
that you are.
Well, let's do a different comparison then, because that's like, I think not necessarily capturing what I'm imagining. I would be appreciative of an apple that fell nearby if I was hungry, and I would still use the word of.
No.
yeah,
no,
yeah,
but-
because that is objective though. We're saying that the
Yeah.
of is objective anyway. So you chose an
I'm saying it's the
objective
same
case.
of whenever you bring me seltzers, Adam.
Wait, so you view Adam in the same way that? So okay, here's what we're asking: Is
Okay.
there any difference between on one end of the spectrum a broken vending machine that happens to like spit out a seltzer for free versus Adam who brings over one with all of these kind of intentions and he like wanted to do something kind for you versus like a tree dropping an apple is somewhere in between those two?
So I think this is actually kind of what Sommers alludes to in his observations about people critiquing the objective attitude, in that he said the examples are always given kind of like a slanted like shallowness. Like you're basically putting me in the situation where I equate Adam to a vending machine.
No, but
But I think I'm gonna like he's not a vending machine. I don't literally view him as just like kind of like a you know, marginal
Mhm.
like utility increasing, you know, device on my part.
Sure.
Like I think there's a deep richness even without the kind of reactive stance there.
However, with the language that you employ, though, you're not actually equating me to a vending machine at all. But with the language, you are viewing me with the same agency as the vending machine.
Yes,
Well, that could be
that's
just
what
an-
I was. Yeah.
That's an enormous. Well, I mean, yeah, I
you
think I
react-
am.
Wait,
I
wait.
think because neither of us have agency, so
Wait,
it is technically
agency
true.
isn't the question. Agency isn't the question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's do you react to them the same? And I think you don't, because I wouldn't. If a broken vending machine like gave me a seltzer for free, I would be like, hell yeah, like this is awesome. I would have no gratitude towards the vending machine. If Adam brings over a seltzer just out of nowhere, I'd be like, oh, thanks, man. Like that was super nice of you. And I would have gratitude towards him. It's not about the agency. It's about your reaction to them. Because the whole point I think that we're trying to make is that these things are separable concepts. Well, that's the point that I was making where he doesn't engage.
Well, I think they're separable, but based on like other factors, mostly the fact that humans are deeply complex.
No, but that's I think that's on a different level of analysis, because do you remember we were talking about like this is like another paper I need to write at some point, but like all of these compatibilist distinctions are actually about evaluations of character. They're not about evaluations of freedom, right? I don't think that comes down to like much more of the kind of deep moral responsibility question. But the reactive attitudes, I think, is much a shallower and like I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Like so what I'm asking you is not necessarily do you evaluate them differently or do you think they have different levels of agency? This is just like a very kind of basic question. Is do you react to those two things differently?
Of course I do.
Okay.
But that can be explained by things other than like.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we get a different example than a vending machine, just so we can get it like?
Okay, I'll give you one.
Like I just like feel like I just genuinely feel bad because I feel like we're just calling Adam a vending machine over and over.
No, but the thing is,
it's the contrast that he's.
Okay. Let me give a different example, Giffen.
Sure.
So what about, you're drowning, but then a dog jumps in the river to save you, and then kind of drags you out of the water.
That's
versus a human being that jumps in and drags you out of the water. Are you going to have different reactions to the dog and the human?
Yes, I will. But it'd probably be pretty damn similar. Not gonna lie.
Sure.
I would just be remarking about the remarkableness of this like dog that just is like you're risking its life for me.
And do you think something would be lost if you view? So you said they're very similar. Would anything be lost, even just minutely, if you viewed the human who saved you as identical to the dog who saved you?
Well, again, yes, technically, but it's not really a loss. It's a change. I really don't view it as a loss.
See,
like, regardless, in both situations, the universe has cascaded down for billions of years to the point where
it's a different level of an. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I mean you got the gist of it though. Like
yeah, but so my entire point about all of this is that I think that that's a different level of analysis. So this is why I think Summers makes a mistake to talk about RMR.
But I don't think it's necessarily, because you said a different level of analysis, and you're kind of referring back to like the cognitive load of the objective attitude, right?
Yes.
But what I'm saying is it is possible to like either you can just imagine either a world where it's the barrier is much lower or
there
whatever.
There is no cognitive
load.
There's
a single moment where everything aligns and I just like naturally have taken this without any cognitive load, right?
Oh, you're actually not talking about the cognitive load now. You're talking about the degradation.
No, I'm talking about the cognitive load.
Well, I think you mean to be talking about the degradation.
I'm pretty sure.
Because like in a world in which it's totally, let's just remove any barriers to the objective attitude. It's something that you actually can just embody.
Yeah.
I actually do think that something would be lost because of the degradation to the person.
Well, this could be an example where not the entire universe is different, but just like that person is particularly predisposed towards the objective attitude or something.
Well, so remember, Summers is making a claim about the ubiquitous objective stance. So if I viewed, I'll circle back to the question you asked. You said, how often do you find yourself taking both stances? Yeah. I find myself taking the objective stance very often. Yeah. Very often indeed.
Okay, cool.
However, there's like another paper I want to write. I think that the objective stance is a good measure. It's actually a really good heuristic of how well or how poorly your relationship is with someone. So for me, this is just me personally. I'm curious if you guys differ, but with someone who I have just a really, really wonderful relationship with, I rarely, if ever, embody the objective stance. Obviously, I actually do with everyone at some, like, you just got to kind of grease the wheels of the relationship from time to time, right? Like, they're always just little things that you need to
Performative actions are reflective.
you just gotta like let go of something or just like gloss over it. Like you just you can't always be reactive, right? But like so when Adam and I play badminton, there actually would be something lost to those games if I viewed both him and myself in the total objective stance. Like I get
What would be lost?
So I wouldn't actually be able to feel like both. Like sometimes I'm like extremely angry with him that he's like just won like that series like like that series over and over. But it's like a very it's like a very it's like a fun kind of mad. But I'm actually like seriously angry with him and like seriously angry with myself when I lose. Like Adam is like. And like strong reactive attitudes, you know what I mean? And then we'll like laugh about it, like how angry I got when I lose, right? And so like, so all of our interactions are extremely reflexive for me. I for 0 seconds of the good interactions am thinking about how to kind of manage him, how to produce certain reactions in him. I'm not thinking of any of that actually.
But it sounds like then what do you kind of have lost?
And if I were to do those things, I would lose the very kind of reflexive things that make our relationship what it is.
Well, to me, what you're describing is what you lose if you go to the objective stance is like just like the mental processing that has to occur.
It's more than that.
You lose
the
the change in like perspective would be like Jordan would be like furious that the game was going the way it was, that he was unable to play, as well as he.
It can include you in that calculation though.
It could, but it wouldn't be directed, and the directed part makes it fun. So.
Yes, it can still be directed. It can still be directed.
Well, no, it could be directed, but it would have to be explicitly for consequentialist aims. I would have to be expressing my anger at Adam for an aim.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, well, so we really disagree about this then. So let's get into it. Yeah.
So as this kind of connects back to the conversation I was having before about like the necessity of the cognitive load. If you can imagine that like that the objective stance has been like the default. So you don't have to worry about like the negative aspect of taking the objective stance being like you have to reflect and like the heavy cognitive load about your decisions. That can be taken away because we discussed the fact that it's not necessarily that case. I understand totally in your example, like you'd lose so much because you're like reflecting on like the consequentialist aspect constantly. Like that sounds awful. Like just truly embodying like a deeply concerned consequentialist at all times is awful. What I'm saying is you can still get like so like the natural like course of your reaction can still be directed. It can still have like basically zero cognitive load because it would be just reflective, based on all of your all the environment leading up to that point. It can still involve like the deep aspect of the interpersonal relationship with the other person. Like all of your lived shared experiences, the uniqueness of that person that you're with, the odds of just like the beautiful day that you're sharing. All of that can still be captured in the objective stance.
And then what would you have to add for it to be reactive then?
Good question.
Because
you'd have to for it to be reactive, then you'd have to just have an internalized sense that they're an agent, I guess, right? Definitionally.
That's where I just know. You don't have to hold.
Isn't that what the reactive attitude is?
Well, I don't think you have to hold this cognitive stance of this person is an agent. Like that. See, this is where I think that like Summers goes wrong is because he thinks that all of this results from like determinism being true. But no, like I actually don't think that that takes reactive attitudes off the table.
Well,
like
is not the reactive attitude defined by the viewing of the object as an agent?
Giffen, I think, like for me at least, like the answer to that question, like for me, is yes. But at the same time,
Yes, what? I don't know what question. I'm sorry.
The question that you need to view the other person as an agent for it to be a reactive attitude.
Right.
But
As
hang
if
on,
they
but as if they were, an agent. So, but the thing is though, let's see, where was I going to go with that one? All right, circle back.
I messed
I'm
you
sorry.
up.
No, like that
Adam,
interruption.
in
I
the
was like,
middle
yes.
yeah,
that was my
sorry,
bad.
sorry.
I
That
just
was my
genuinely
bad.
wasn't sure what question you were referencing.
I'm-
I can just keep talking until you get that reactive
Oh
attitude.
no, okay. No, I've got
There
it
it is.
back. I've got it back. No, but the idea is that, it's gone again. It's gone again. It's gone again. It disappeared twice. How?
Did we want to read any more of the paper?
What a terrible thing. I've got it one more time.
Okay, go for
Go.
it.
One final time. Okay, so the idea with the reactive attitude is that you're not consciously holding that idea that like the other person's an agent. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's just kind of like a built-in assumption,
Sure.
right? So, but I think with like the objective attitude, you're kind of like almost, at least for me, like consciously holding the idea that the other person's like actually
Yeah.
they're not an agent. So
I totally agree.
yeah, so but
But what I'm saying is, though, that view is not a necessity. It is proportionally, basically, every human.
Wait, it's not a necessity to the objective attitude?
No, it's not a necessity that humans
Have to behave
naturally.
But I don't
do
think we were
things
ever
in-
saying. Not natural. But I think that I already admitted that you can kind of like accustom yourself to.
Well, to me, that I think that makes you committed to like a change of stance then with this example, because
No.
if the only thing that's different is that you can like you have somehow developed in like the deep back of your mind,
Yeah.
you've like removed that default human instinct to review other people as agents.
Well, no, we were talking about one person versus all of humanity. Like that is a big difference.
Well, I'm talking about in the badminton example.
But that would be just one like I could attend.
Well, well, we're talking about like this person. I mean, the objective reaction and the reactive attitudes we're talking about are with respect to a person. So that's why we're using this person as an example in this case. What I'm saying is, you can just imagine a world without that deep, like, or just imagine like this person miraculously, the only person in human existence, just did not get that ingrained sense of agency in other people.
Sure.
Can have just as rich of a relationship with another person because he's doing the same thing. He's reacting to his joy and everything else in this badminton match and afterwards and in the reflection. It's just that in the back of his mind, he just doesn't have that sense of the agency.
I don't know what you mean by that then. So like if he doesn't have a sense of agency, but he's doing things that are indistinguishable from the reactive attitudes, what does that mean then to have a sense of agency?
Well, we're not talking about his sense of agency. We're talking about his sense of the
Other
other
people's.
person's
Sure.
agency.
What does that mean then?
Well, I mean, I guess we agreed that like humans have a kind of deep internalized aspect of their psychology, which imparts onto other people agency, right?
Yeah.
We behave as if they have agency, right?
Yes. Naturally.
I'm just imagining a person who just did not.
I know what you're imagining, but I'm saying you have failed to clarify, I think, how that. So you're saying this person has everything the reactive attitudes have to offer, but he just doesn't view people as agents. And I'm saying, what do you mean by that? Because that's how we like to view someone as if they were agentic is to have these reactions towards them.
Not necessarily.
I think you're even disagreeing with Summers here.
I may be. I'm not sure.
I think that you're maybe confusing a few. There are a couple parallel lines that I think you might be running together. Because like
It's possible.
yeah.
But
I don't
let's
know.
actually go back to like a specific emotion though,
Sure.
like directed emotion. So I don't know. I mean, because Giffen, you're saying you could like kind of view somebody the same, but also like hold the idea that they're not agentic, which is like, fine. But like, let's say, I don't know, like what would be a good emotion here? Just like, I don't know, how about
hate, whatever. I don't know.
just gratitude.
Sure.
Like, can you really view, can you have like gratitude towards someone, but also like hold that they're not agentic?
Absolutely.
But you got to hold both thoughts simultaneously.
Sure.
Okay, so what would that look like to you?
I'm imagining a deeply, deeply complex animal like a dolphin or an elephant just doing some absurd task, like Jordan in the drowning dog scenario. Mm-hmm. I would hold gratitude towards like one of those most deeply intelligent animals, and I don't have any internalized sense that they are agents. Would that be an example that explains it?
Not exactly with that.
I think that you've even disagreed with Summers here. Like, he explicitly says that under the objective stance, you wouldn't even be grateful like to someone. You would be grateful that they were the way they were. So, I mean, like,
it's kind of similar though.
No. It's directed versus very kind of just generalized.
No, that's not the difference though, because you can direct at objects. We already discussed this, I thought.
No, but to direct at objects under the objective stance would have to be for some sort of other aim, is what I'm saying. Like that,
but
because
if you need to be for some other aim though, because you said it can be non-cognitive.
Can you be like grateful to the tree? Can you be grateful to the tree, or can you be grateful of the tree? Like if it drops an apple,
you can be grateful to the tree.
You can be grateful to the tree.
Yeah.
I think we're just having like linguistic difficulties at this point.
I don't know. I feel like this is a point of clarification.
Like, I think you could be kind of grateful, like, to the tree in a deep sense. You just kind of be mistaken. But I can get, like, I can understand that concept. You'd be like very mistaken.
Imagine
like you'd be grateful of the tree.
You
know what I mean? Like,
no, you could personify the tree. Like,
okay, no, but
that's your point.
No, exactly. I mean,
I'm agreeing.
I mean,
Adam,
like,
I'm agreeing.
You can personify the tree. Yes, that's what I'm getting at here.
No, I'm saying.
I want to go back to your concern just a moment ago about there needs to be some reason for which you are acting.
Under the objective stance, you're viewing someone as something to be accounted for.
I thought that like definitionally it's simply like the lack of agency on their part.
No, that's not even Summers' definition. He just says that no one is deserving of praise or blame. It really has nothing to do with agency. Like
I thought like his basis for that claim was the fact that the agency is what is required for praise and blame.
No, he's saying grant that no one's causa sui, that determinism is true, right? That seems to imply that there is no robust moral responsibility, and that necessitates an exclusive objectivity of attitude. That was a quote from him. The subjective thing, he brought that up as this is a reason why people resist this conclusion.
Sure.
Right? But I'm saying that, okay, unless the objective attitude incorporates into it a requirement of the objective attitude is that you are treating people as variables to be manipulated in the situation like you would just an inanimate object, right?
I don't know that he's making that claim.
No, I know he's not. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What is then you're collapsing this distinction that I think is like a really good one that we talked about in the series previously, about there's this sense of retributive moral responsibility versus just like shallow attitudinal moral responsibility, aka the reactive attitudes.
Okay.
If you're just saying that the objective stance is just saying people don't really deserve praise or blame, that's not enough, because that's indistinguishable from saying just, okay, no one is retributively morally responsible. Like, it's beginning to become like a semantic point, but if you have to keep, if we're acknowledging that those two things are conceptually different, which we've all agreed that they are,
the two things being
desert-based moral responsibility or just attitudinal kind of reactions to people, those are conceptually at least two different things. Don't die on this hill. We've already granted this like in previous parts of the series.
I'm just making sure I understand your
Okay.
point. So what would be in this case the
Yeah.
attitudinal part?
The attitudinal part is whether you naturally, in an unfiltered way, allow your kind of just your moral emotions to come out, right? Like you could I'm saying you could be reactive.
To me, wait. So is
Yeah.
attitudinal just non-cognitive? Is that what you're claiming here?
Yeah, like it can't be. Yeah. I can't be reactively blaming you if I'm also kind of evaluating, is this the right thing to do in order to get Giffen to become a better person? And then I say, yes, now I'm going to express blame towards him.
So you're
That's the
talking.
objective stance.
I didn't even think that what you're describing as like the reaction, the attitudinal reactive attitude, being based on like cognitive load. I didn't even think we were talking about that.
I have no idea what your question is there.
So the attitudinal, you seem to be defining the attitudinal reactive attitude as simply a lack of cognitive load.
It's the natural reaction that arises.
Non-cognitive then.
Sure.
Yeah. I didn't really think we were having a conversation in that realm at all.
I think the problem is you're overvalencing things. So like
Jordan, I think you're moving away from the paper though.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe.
I know. I really do think
Let's
you're moving.
return to it
You're
then.
moving away from like how Summers is actually evaluating like the
Okay, fine.
objective
But
attitude here,
just
because
I'm saying that there is
Giffen's
multiple,
basing his argument on the paper, like you know,
Yes.
like Summers is like, okay, you know, it's when Giffen is assessing the objective attitude, he's assessing it purely on Summers' view that you're not grateful to someone, you're grateful of a person being that way. You're not like it's
So I'll just say that like it's holding the view of the objective. Like I think he's like critically missing those two things. So it is weird for me to do that, but fine, you make a good point. Let's cover kind of maybe generally the rest of the paper from just this narrower Summers sense. Let's do that.
Let's go real fast to just like one of the emotions that he covers. Like, why don't we go to
Yes.
something like
Can I table this real quick? He just says that like so basically, he's saying that the objective attitude is always theoretically warranted. Now we just have to look at what that would actually look like. So he imagines someone who's convinced by the RMR skepticism arguments
Mhm.
and wishes to adopt the objective attitude towards everyone, again, under his definition, including herself at all times. And he says, what would that look like under kind of the following things? So which one did you want to look at?
I think love might be the best one here.
Okay. That was
Sure.
funny. That's just funny because I had the least kind of highlights and notes on that one.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
but go
well,
for it because maybe I missed it. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, let's see here. I mean, I
Where
didn't
page are
highlight.
we on, Adam?
This would be. It starts on 331.
Okay, just past it.
Yeah, let's see here. Because I want to get exactly what Summers here says about how love would look under the objective attitude.
Do you have the quote, Adam? Because if not, I'd like to actually give a propitiatory remark to Giffen and Summers.
Well, I
I'll
mean,
take the remark.
yeah, give
lieu
the
of
remark,
Summers.
and then we
Okay.
can touch upon this emotion.
Sure.
One thing that I just wholeheartedly agree with
Yeah.
is that he says, this person, Sally, could take the objective stance. This was in the resentment and indignation section. Sally could take the objective stance, and, quote, none of this, of course, means that Sally would not want the thief caught, not put in jail to deter other criminals and prevent other crimes. But
Yeah.
that would, in theory, be the only reason Sally desires the thief's incarceration. I 100% agree with that, and that's a wonderful asymmetrical benefit that the objective stance brings with it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, sure. I didn't think you would disagree with that point actually.
No, but I just wanted to kind of, for you, Summers, and the listeners, like just give like because I've been teasing that there's just so much I agree with in this paper, and that is really one of them. And he says, I should note that Sally is not, after all, eliminating the feeling. She is merely attempting not to engage or entertain the feeling. She wants to minimize its effect on her behavior. That is where I totally agree, but that is where I was deriving a good bit of the cognitive load aspect from.
Okay, I actually have a quick question. This could be totally not clarifying, and then we'll just go to Adam in that case.
Yeah.
But when you said you were like kind of like deeply exploring like these topics, and you were like in the process of writing or like planning to write some things on these, is your point of concern when to take reactive oh my god,
attitudes or actions?
No, sorry.
Oh.
Is your oh my god, I feel like such a dullard right now. There's like one word I'm
You feel like a dullard?
Yes,
I forgot the same thing twice. That's the first time in my life I forgot the same thing twice.
Okay, I recall now. The humor seemed to spark my memory. Jordan, are your points of concern with like the things you're writing about concerning the attitudinal reactive attitudes? Are you concerned with when it is appropriate or not to use the attitudinal reactive attitude?
What are you juxtaposing that? Or is that a... I think the answer is yes, but I'm not 100% sure on the question.
You said that there's a difference between the attitudinal reactive attitude and the was your...
That sounds like a tautology to me, an attitudinal reactive attitude.
It's not a tautology because the difference is the reaction.
I think you just mean to say like reactive attitudes versus reactive actions. Are you just talking about like that?
No, I don't think so. You had
What
clarified. You had clarified to me that the attitudinal reactive attitudes concern cognitive load. Is that kind of like...
No, I think you're
when is it
conflating.
appropriate to use cognitive load or not?
No, I think that's just a really just very confused question.
Well, I was confused by like you bringing this up prior. I wasn't sure if like this entire conversation you were concerned with the attitudinal reactive attitude.
Attitudinal is a tautology there.
It's not a tautology.
No, the cognitive portion is how I was differentiating the reactive from the objective attitudes, not the attitudinal reactive attitudes versus some other type of reactive attitudes.
Well, you were the one who brought up the attitudinal reactive attitudes prior.
I don't think I did. If I did, I just meant to say reactive attitudes
attitude.
versus reactive actions.
I didn't remember the phrase attitudinal reactive attitudes, or if we discussed it previously.
I'm sure. Okay, but I'm just telling you now, though, if I said that it was a mistake. Yeah.
That's fine. Do you define then the objective versus the reactive by the cognitive load explicitly? Like that's definitionally what the difference is.
At first I did, and now I think that there might be a bit of a pre-commitment thesis that you can run with the objective stance.
I think that was my main concern because I don't view that as
that's really not the core of like.
It feels like the core of what I was concerned with, but that may not necessarily be the core of the paper. I don't know. Does anyone else? Am I just like some lunatic harping about semantics?
No, it's just funny because you both like cut each other off mid-sentence there. It's like I have no idea what you guys are trying to say.
I think Jordan and I understood each other, but
we
like
did
exactly. Yeah.
If that's bad listening, I'll just cut it. If that's bad listening,
well, I can just like repeat like what I.
No, please don't. Let's move on to Adam's point about love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam, please.
I'll just read this little portion here. So, romantic love and friendships evolve because of who we are, how we naturally complement each other, the good times, good jokes, and tragedies that we go through together. None of this is undermined by the objective attitude. I really need to zoom in here.
Can you tell us what page, paragraph?
Yeah, so this kind of the end of 332 into 333.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wonder, like, Giffen, what would that look like to, be with like, a significant other and then constantly hold, the idea that they're, non-agentic, just like.
It would probably look like a normal relationship from the outside.
Exactly. Yeah. But we're not talking about actions here because often we've said that actions can be,
Valence
different attitudes can lead to the same actions. But I'm
Well,
wondering, like
for a person for whom there aren't enormous barriers to taking the objective attitude, i.e., like very low or minimal cognitive load to the point where the reactive attitude would actually be higher in cognitive load, that would feel pretty normal.
When we're talking about love,
Nobody's
though,
asking.
we're talking about like deep relationships with people. Like if you just suddenly switched over, after it could be like a parent, could be like a sibling, could be like a partner, but but you're like, if you tried switching over now and just viewing them as just an object in a sense, just like they can this object is.
Well, you're not viewing him as just an object. You're viewing him as the most complex object in the universe, basically.
That's true, but
just to be clear, it's not like, what if you viewed him as a vase? Like, that's not necessarily.
But that's not what he's asking.
There's a
I just
certain
want
kind
you to understand that, like,
uniqueness.
I think you're really not
huge
answering.
depth that's basically still there in this interpersonal relationship.
Sorry,
That's
Brad,
what-
what were you saying?
Hmm?
You had an interjection there. I was curious. What
Oh, I was just saying. I think I was just making a clarifying point. I think Giffen was just trying to say there was a level of uniqueness to the object that makes it uniquely fascinating. And
Yeah, right. It is different, clearly, even if you only ever took the objective stance between, like, loving a vase versus loving a person.
The problem, though, Giffen, that's true from either perspective. That's true from the objective stance and the reactive stance. Both can still say that it's the most complex thing in the universe. Adam, maybe rephrase.
Well,
your
I was
then.
doing that specifically because Adam was emphasizing the word like object there. It's like, I feel like that imparts a little bit of bias towards like what we're viewing.
Well, okay, wait. Okay, let's be clear on this though. An object and an agent are two different ways of viewing someone. You yourself,
as if they were an agent, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that's I think what Adam is kind of like repeatedly asking. Then, am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, and also I don't think. I mean, it definitely sounded bad. I agree with that, Giffen, but it is the objective attitude,
You're right.
So,
No,
like,
you are
viewing.
It's too easy to just we're preconditioned to viewing them as an object is just like a bad, right? It's like the objectification of women or something. I just wanted to
so you're gonna
change the language slightly to I don't know, say a human being or something.
Yeah, sure. So you're gonna hold in your head like it's gonna be it's a cognitive chore at first. Maybe you can this will become second nature or maybe first nature. But you switch over and have to cognitively hold the fact, and continue to remind yourself of the fact that, yes, like my wife might have, I don't know, maybe like cooked me like a delicious dinner and like gave me like a back massage or something wonderful, like, or whatever. But at the same time, like I'm thankful that they are who they are, but I'm not really thankful, that they acted in this way necessarily. I'm thankful of who they are, but at this, I don't know. I mean. Well, hang on. I really have to rephrase that because I know you're jumping on that part. So,
well, sorry. I mean, it just comes to my mind.
No, I mean, like the distinction here is that like it's.
I'll just remark quickly. It seems like you're kind of emphasizing the cognitive load aspect. You're constantly reminding yourself that, but we can talk.
No, but it's not the energy. It's the idea that you're holding.
Because that's what it's being emphasized. That's what I'm trying to clarify. That is irrelevant.
It's not, because it's the idea that you have to hold this thought in your head.
You don't have to hold it in your head consciously. Like we said, it can require zero cognitive load.
No, but once you've accustomed yourself to it, though. But
right.
But we're not talking about that. Just table that for a second.
Okay, I'll table that. I apologize. Communicating.
When you're initially kind of faced with this, do I take the objective stance or not? This is what Adam's asking about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some transition period here, right?
Yes.
Where you've so like given that you would have to pretty much recondition yourself. I mean, you're going to be viewing this.
It'll be deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't think it's going to be like kind of a degrading process for the, for like your partner at that point, like they would know it. I mean, but you're just sort of like viewing them as this, highly complex object that,
I mean, to me, if I was preconditioned, like humans are, it would feel degrading, perhaps. But again, this is actually where we bring in like the Jacob. Is it Jacob?
Joshua.
Josh, sorry, one of the biblical figures.
Mm-hmm.
This is like it's this analogous to like the born, deeply religious Jew who, like, in that transition period, you would probably feel a sense like, as you like kind of take away the magnitude of God and like you realize that it's like irrational, you would probably experience some sort of like lessening, especially while you're still like internally resisting. But that's not really like the transition isn't really what's interesting here in this conversation, because we're talking about whether it's possible at all ever for like an objective attitude to be as like rich.
Okay.
Right. So it's not the transition that's really important here.
Okay. The transition, will completely ignore the transition because like the transition is like that's no longer important. But like,
okay. I'm glad we clarified.
But I want you just to like actually think about like like how your own attitude would change here, where it's just like, it definitely takes on a different attitude. Like, just imagine, someone doing something really good for you.
Sure.
And then now imagine that you now like, are grateful that this person is the way they are rather than what they've just done for you. Or like in a sense that you're directed, like, you're not grateful to them for what they just did. You're grateful of them.
But you keep saying like that it's not the difference is that it's not directed, but we clarified already that we can have directed towards non-agents, people we view as non-agents. So if you're, the conclusion you drew there at the very end clarified the difference being the directedness, but we clarified that that's not necessarily the case as the difference between like the attitudes. Do you see what I'm saying, Adam?
I actually still haven't conceded that point. If somebody else conceded that point, I don't think
I thought we decided that the objective attitude.
I did not decide that.
Okay, no, that's fine.
That I hold directed, like, reactive attitudes toward things that I can do that I do not consider agency.
Giffen, I never
like I don't hate the rock if like I stub my toe. You know what I mean? Like, I just
I didn't say that you took reactive attitudes towards trees, which would be kind of a personification. I thought what we were discussing, and I thought you agreed to, was you can take the objective attitude towards things.
The objective attitude, sure. Yeah, I can be mad that rock was there. Just generally annoyed that I stubbed my toe, but I'm not. Nothing's gonna be directed at the rock.
Well, no, that is directing it though.
No, it's I'm not mad at the rock. I might be mad the rock was there. You know,
are you mad at the emotion of the pain then?
We're mad at the emotion.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I could be mad at a headache.
That makes sense.
Like just like mad of a headache, but I'm not like mad at the headache. Just like damn the headache. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah, it's like, but I could be mad.
I'm confused on what the directedness really is a conversation about then, because to me, like in the example you gave, you basically took away a direction, of like my emotions from like the thing, in this case, like a human being, and just towards like the kind of scenario. But I don't really know if you need to internalize it as like appreciate, like specifically in your mind, like the thought doesn't need to go through your head, I'm appreciative of this scenario. It can still be directed in a sense that like you identify this thing as like separate from the rest of the environment, and your appreciation is directed specifically there.
Yeah, but it wasn't really.
That's what directedness.
Yeah, but it really wasn't like caused by that person. Like it just, it is.
I mean, it was just not in like the grand sense of agency. But do you see what I'm saying? Whenever you said directedness, I thought you meant like it's almost like a specificity kind of claim. Like I'm able to identify like this fleshy, hairy beast as a object separate from the environment, and my appreciation is towards this, as opposed to just like the universe. You don't have to internalize it as I appreciate the universe every time.
Or
No,
with-
no, no. I know. I mean, you can appreciate like the being, like you said, but
That's directedness to me. That's what I thought you meant when you said directedness.
yeah. So
Do you see what
Just,
at least
but just
what I'm
because
going
you're
for?
thinking about something isn't directedness, because it's otherwise like
I
all
thought it
you
was.
ha- Well, Giffen, but to be fair, that's
'Cause,
kind
no,
of a
you guys were
crazy standard,
clarifying-
because then it's either just like this gratitude that's like amorphous versus like an anger that's amorphous. It's like
Well, that's what you were describing to me in the difference. You were saying there's a like in one case you're happy about the situation, versus happy about that person doing it. But I'm saying like that's not necessarily the distinction.
no, but it is. If either the reactive attitude or the objective attitude, it's not like you're an idiot. You know what you're mad about, right? Like you don't just
Sure.
have to be mad. Like you can know what you're angry about. But if you're
Sure.
mad at someone, that's different than being mad that something happened. I know we keep using this damn language, but do you get how it's not just both people understand that it's like this feeling about like they know that they were like the local cause of the anger, right?
Right.
But is there any sense? I mean, I think you're denying things that you don't have to deny. Like there is some difference between those two things. I think you're really digging your heels in on something that doesn't need to be.
Well, I just was trying to react to your descriptions because to me, I thought your claims about like the directedness, that like, you can't direct when you're in the objective attitude towards something. That was confusing to me because I didn't realize that for you, directedness is specifically linked to agency.
no,
Dude. I feel like you're not listening to us, honestly.
I truly am listening.
no.
Let's
It's
walk
like,
through it step by step.
No, I guess like the frustrated like part for me, right? Like the frustrating part for me is like the idea that like I don't know. I want to hear from you like at some point, like whenever I could raise one of these examples, like there is some difference between like the reactive and objective attitude in like you can actually like when you think of like how you would kind of like look at two different situations that there is a difference, but you're like I don't really see the difference, and I'm like
Then,
okay, well
yes.
how do I kind of like illustrate
Then
the
what's your
difference? And you're like
thesis? Yes,
but because the thing is like I you keep arguing like out of like one side of your mouth that you think we don't really like lose anything from it, and that it could actually be like better, and that you think like the paper makes a good point, and that's totally fair.
Yeah.
But then at the other time, like I keep putting out examples, and you're like I don't really see a difference between what you've said,
Can't
and it's
have
like
both of those
and,
two
and it's
things.
and it's not because my explanations haven't been it's not that they've been like good or anything like that they haven't been good, but the idea is like I just want to like hear you make that distinction and say yes I agree there's a difference, but
Spell it out.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like
Okay.
but you keep saying like I
You're
don't
having
really
it
see
both
any
ways.
difference, and it's like damn it
Well, this might be the
it's not-
framing of the
yeah.
example then in this case. So what is the difference between that we're talking about here?
No. We're
this-
asking you. You need to provide us with a positive account. That is the only possible like productive course of this conversation, I think. If Adam is saying you are stating that there is a difference on the one hand, and then when we give you any example, you're saying, well, I don't really see that big a difference.
Well, this might be the kind of implied meanings of the questions then. So we can go through each of them.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like once again, like I mean,
So
like,
in
we're,
a-
like
Can I
broken
ask-
records at this point, but it's
Yeah.
not just a linguistic trick we're trying to pull upon you. Like I'm not like it's like a bag of
Can I-
magic
can
tricks
I
that I'm
try
trying to
asking
use
it?
here.
Yeah.
Can I try asking it, Adam? Okay, Giffen, you
Sure.
said that Summers' thesis is a good one, and it's an interesting one. Summers' thesis is the following. If we adopt in all situations the objective stance, then things change, and things change for the better. If that is what you're agreeing with, then it's incompatible to also say, I don't really see that much of a difference between the objective and the reactive stances. So if you want to say the former, please just give us an account of how
Okay.
things are changing for you.
I think
Subjectively, yeah.
I can try this. I think this is good to lay out. So in practical terms, it will be a different world, right? In one in which, I mean, that's too broad of an example. If people started
consciously trying to remind themselves to take the objective stance, like literally just in our world right now, like as we might have tried to do after reading all these papers about moral responsibility, we might lead to a better world, right? That's like the one claim, right?
Okay, I'm gonna need a hell of a lot. That's just saying it cashes out in better consequences, but
Sure.
but that's not at all what I was asking.
Okay, we'll ask the question again.
From your perspective.
Okay.
So I don't want to hear about like it's better for the world, it creates better out, because I'm granting that too,
Okay.
and yet we're still disagreeing. So if you're saying that from your perspective, all I want to hear about is like Giffen, me, right? From your perspective, if adopting the objective attitude with respect to yourself and others always and ubiquitously would create some difference, and that difference would be better, as Summers argues, what does that look like for you?
Just a moment.
Because if you can't spell that out, I don't think you have really bought his thesis.
Well, I mean, we might be just discovering that I have a slightly different view.
But tell us it then, 'cause we still don't know it. Yeah.
Okay. So, strictly the difference from my perspective, if I try to adopt the objective attitude?
If you adopt the objective attitude always and towards everyone, including yourself, what does that look like? What's the difference?
If it was me specifically, like in this world, it would probably involve higher cognitive loads. Is that?
That's like a part of an answer. But like, you have to give some positive account of this.
I mean, the thing is, like,
what do you mean a positive account? That's
like
a difference. That's
like Summers does give positive accounts. Like he says,
yes,
like,
but don't give those to Giffen, because I want to hear what his account is.
Well, what do you mean by account then? I just clarified like a difference.
All you said is that there's more cognitive load. That has no moral valence, like positively or negatively. I don't even see like how
it can be equivalent.
Giffen, I think I'll be honest here.
I think Giffen, I'm gonna bail you out here for a second, all right? Because like Summers does say things along the lines of like, okay, you know, no, but like, you know, when you take the objective attitude and you're just, you know, viewing people as objects, you're not going to hold emotions like, you know, resentment. And he does give you the emotion equivalent.
Adam, he actually doesn't say that you have to view people as objects, which was one of my quibbles. Like he says, the only thing he says, I'll quote, taking the objective attitude commits us only to regarding human beings as creatures who cannot deserve praise or blame. That's apparently it for Strawson.
Okay, but
sorry. I'm so sorry, Summers. Yeah.
Yeah. But let me just go back to that conclusion again, where he says that, so no longer would we view criminals with hatred and deep resentment, desiring punishment well beyond any pragmatic goals.
Yep.
Right.
Deserving those things.
Yeah, and I have argued that nothing about the objective attitude. Yeah, so it doesn't preclude feelings of exuberance, love. But there was another thing here too.
Yeah.
See, relentless judging requires a lot of mental energy. And so it's energy that might otherwise be directed towards understanding and appreciating what life and other human beings have to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That seems like a bit of a tangential benefit, though. Because, I mean, he does...
That one seems tangential.
Because he's explicit with it. I mean, he's like... Because he does... I mean, he has a whole section about just like, you know, tangential. He goes into politics. Like, it just turns down the heat. Like, it allows you to actually understand the perspective. And he even called he calls that, whatever it is, you know, tangential fringe benefits of RMR skepticism, right? But like, what we're I think begging for from you is that like, Summers has said, if everyone takes the objective attitude, here's what it's going to look like. You're not going to think that anyone deserves praise or blame, and you're not. You know, you could even, he's actually saying that you could sort of, he brings this up with Sally, you could really condition yourself, presumably not even to have those impulses of praise or blame.
Sure.
So when we're asking you, what does this world look like? Is it exactly that, or is it something
Well, you didn't
different?
you didn't ask me what the world looked like. You asked me what it was from my perspective. I tried to answer what the world would look like.
Okay,
then I
okay.
was directed towards my perspective.
What does it look like from your perspective? Because that's what
like
what it would look like
what would the
from someone's
consequences be? I don't know.
No, not the consequences.
Well,
From your
I don't know.
perspective.
Like, well, he gave consequences. He said like a person would be like less.
No, but that's
project-
not how he defined it.
Correct.
You're confusing the definition with the consequences. He said he defined it as someone would no longer view people as deserving praise or blame, and the outcomes are those things. I'm asking you for that same account. If it's identical to Summers, tell us it's identical to Summers. If it's not, then tell us what it is.
Okay, when you mean account, you mean just the definition then.
Yes.
Okay, well that was not clear to me.
Okay.
I mean, like, just seriously, Logan,
Wait, give it
definition
now.
would have
But
been-
just give it now. Just because we keep begging, and then well, you didn't ask it right, and then you get away from actually answering. So just answer it now.
I don't think this is going anywhere. It's like we keep talking past each other with this.
I know,
one.
but I'm asking. So here's what I'm doing though, because I'm
Yeah.
I'm expressing strong reactive attitudes right now because I think that Giffen's doing something irresponsible where he if you're making a different point in the paper, because he said, oh, I might be making a different point in the paper. We need to know what that is, right?
That's fine.
So,
I mean,
like,
it may be a
I
case
know,
that I wasn't aware of the fact.
I don't know if Given's making a different point in the paper. You
That's
asked,
what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
you
I
said
mean, I think I do kind of agree with it. It's just like that definition specifically is
Well,
a little off. Like, the deserving point, I think, is the kind of the key there.
That's kind of a new development, though.
Wait, your issue with the definition is the deserving part?
No. I think that's like the point of like the main aspect of his definition is like in his definition, deserving of both praise and blame.
Yeah, we already went over this, though. Are you saying you agree with that?
I guess my claim is that specifically as a definition could probably be clarified just a tiny bit, but I think it hinges on the idea of the deserving part.
Okay, to be honest, though, that's like a totally new development because you never said that in anywhere before this point in the podcast.
Well, I don't know if it was a point to clarify until this, or at least I wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
Brian,
I think
Brian.
we've eclipsed like the usefulness of this part of the conversation.
Brian, do you have any idea what we're talking about right now?
I mean, a good portion of that is
I-
certainly getting edited out because it's just the same conversation over and over.
Yeah,
That's
but
brutalist.
I just feel like Jordan. I feel like you pushed to give him into a position like he wasn't entirely in. Because the thing is, like you said, like
That's
okay,
all I'm asking, though.
no,
is,
no,
like,
but
Well-
like, but like the way the conversation went from my perspective was this. You're like, okay, but that's not what Summers says. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm not quite sure. Then are you taking a different position than Summers? And he's like, well, I might be. Then okay, what's your different position than Summers? And then it's like, okay.
Yes, my ask is exactly that.
Well,
Like, just
this
be
Yeah,
clear
but,
about what we're arguing.
but the questioning pretty much like he doesn't exactly know where he stands.
But then we got.
So-
But come on, like, let's not be egoistic about it. Like, then just say that.
I
Right,
think I
like-
did say that. I said multiple times, I think there might just be a confusion on my end. I said that like multiple times.
Well, then are you still?
And then I
here's-
asked with questions.
No,
to
here's my
clarify.
issue though. But then you'll be like just as confident, or you're not making it clear. I have no idea if you're still confident that the world looks very similar or indistinguishable from like the objective versus reactive stance, or is something changing now? Like, the problem is I mean, like Adam's phrase of talking out of both sides of your mouth is kind of true. Like, I actually don't know where you stand at all on like most of the questions then.
That's fair. Because I wasn't quite sure. Again, I thought I had an understanding, but then like the reason of the line of questioning and like the just general process of like the discussion of the paper led me to find uncertainties about it.
Well, yeah, but so all I'm saying is like
I-
those are great to bring up then. Like,
Yeah.
express those. Don't double down.
I think I was expressing them.
No, but the thing is like I just don't think like Summers' definition of like the objective attitude was too detailed in this paper.
No.
It was
I
very
thought we had a
I
common
agree.
understanding of what that was. It's like deserving of
I'm sorry, is it blame and punishment or blame and
Praise their attitudes.
blame and praise? Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Well,
thought
that's
we held a
extremely
common
clear.
understanding about what that meant, but through the process of the discussion, I realized that I may have had a slightly different interpretation of what that meant, right? Because when he says deserving, I think he means deserving, like in a like moral responsibility sense, right? Like humans are not deserving of.
That
It
is
doesn't need to be
what he's
specifically.
saying. Yeah, I mean, he says this is explicitly vitiated by RMR skepticism. But
Okay, so in
my
this
entire
case, yeah. So go ahead, your entire point.
Well, so my entire just kind of like tabling discussion at the beginning was like with my two main issues with it is that he actually hasn't shown that because he's just taken retributive punishment off the table in my mind. He's not accounted for, this asymmetry between the reactive stance. I think we should just move on to like. I mean, obviously, like most of that is just going to be cut because it's just quibbling.
Well, let's hear that
I
though. What were you going to say there?
More onto his definition than he
What?
was.
Yeah, I just think his definition lacks a few things because I think the objective stance requires viewing someone as an object, like as a deterministic variable, and that is saying more than they just don't deserve praise or blame.
So
like,
did you guys actually interpret that definition? Did you interpret that literally, like it was exclusively praise and blame?
Or all of the other attitudes that Strawson discusses.
Okay, so I also imparted that meaning onto it, and that I think came to light during the discussion.
Yeah, but that just seems to be, so you could do that and still not view someone as an object. That's just taking certain attitudes off the table. Just because I don't blame you for something doesn't necessarily mean that I'm taking the objective stance. For instance, you could just not be blameworthy. Like you could have actually not done the action. So if I say like Giffen, like I'm like, this sounds kooky to say because I would never actually say it, but like Giffen, I'm blaming you for lying to me.
Okay.
And then you actually explain how you never lied. Then I wouldn't blame you anymore. But it's not because I'm not viewing you, or it's not because I'm viewing you as an object, like something to be accounted for. It's because you didn't lie, right? So, but to view you as not blameworthy qua objective attitude would be to say, oh, like it would be to view you as an object. Like he's
not claiming that all instances where someone should lack blame are because of this. He's saying where they're like in worlds where, or in situations where like one might. Well, that's what the example you just gave was one where it's like literally like there was no rationality in your suggestion of their blame, even like irregardless, right? Like you literally just had the facts wrong in that case.
Yes, I wasn't. I think you mistook what I was just saying that's to make a conceptual distinction between the fact that so praise or blame can be divorceable from the objective attitude, period, right? So if you say deserving of praise or blame, that's a different thing. I'm getting confused on my own point at this point. We've just been going around.
I also don't think either side has made any good points. Like I'm convinced at this point. Like I've made terrible points.
Because the thing is, it was good until it devolved.
No, but like it devolved because neither side could give a good explanation of like necessarily why the reactive or objective stance was better, except just to point to, okay, imagine the difference. And then Giffen would say,
there's no difference.
Well, no, Giffen would say, I really do think the objective attitude still captures what we like. He agrees with Summers, and it's just in the objective attitude aligns with what we know to be true or what we believe to be true about robust moral responsibility. And we're saying, no, you actually lose something because it's actually degrading. And just imagine that, like actually just like shift your perspective and.
Okay, wait. Okay, so there is like a positive thing that we can do at the end of this here. Okay, here's my question then. Okay, so let's think this through for a second. If taking the objective stance, so let's adopt my definition for a second.
Okay.
Right. if taking the objective stance both includes Summers' account that no one's ever blameworthy or praiseworthy, and it also changes your view of someone into a mechanism or it's a mechanistic kind of variable, something to be accounted for or dealt with in the situation, right? Would that lose something for you? Adam, I think your answer has been defined as yes. Mine is too. I'm curious for Brian and Giffen. Under that definition, do you lose something?
I think right now it would feel. I think you do lose something, and I think we're kind of trending in losing that eventually as we're becoming more and more objective.
Mm.
And so the transition right now feels very abrupt and abrasive, but a transition, hundreds of years down the line, if humanity makes it that far, they feel more seamless. So I do. I don't think it's so abstract. Like it's very abstract, but it's very possible.
No, your historical point is actually a really good one, because I'm thinking of something like understanding the details of a brain tumor, right? Like if we were in the 1700s and someone did a heinous act, we wouldn't even understand to look for a brain tumor, right? But now, this, like the story of Charles Whitman. He climbed the clock tower in University of Texas and killed all those people. And then when we discover the brain tumor just pressing on his amygdala, that actually looks really exculpatory. Like, wow, he actually couldn't have. We do view him as an object at that point. Literally, like his brain and his amygdala, we're looking at how those interact, right? With a tumor. So, yeah, like I think that historical point is a good one. As we learn more and more, I think we will. And this is actually, I think that in not interpersonal cases, like for policy wise, I think the objective attitude is just such a better view of people. I mean, because then, you're just looking at, okay, if Charles Whitman isn't dead yet, can we just remove this brain tumor, right? And then, like, as soon as we know he's a good person, there's no need to hold reactive attitudes towards him or like more, blame him in any sense. So that's like a sense in which I think Summers hits the nail on the head. Yeah, Giffen.
Yeah, to answer the question that was posed to all of us, do we lose something? Only to the extent that the example about the Jewish, deeply religious Jewish person lost something. It's like an impression of loss, not like an actual loss.
I like that actually.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I'm at. It's like, do you lose something? It may feel like you lose something, but I don't think you if you reflect on it, you really do.
So I think the example of like a guy like Whitman, though, I think that illustrates it well for me, though, because it's like, someone like heinous that you don't know like what like physically caused their heinous behavior, you might hold like the reactive attitude toward them. But with like Whitman, you don't even like, I'm sure no one here has like any issue with the guy. You know what I mean? Because you hear that and you're like,
when
okay,
you say
fine.
Don't have any issue with them.
No, but Giffen, you know what I mean with that. You know what I mean? Like objectively, I have an issue that he killed people and like,
it's a moral wrong, clearly.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying like I don't hate the guy.
Yeah.
I don't hate the guy who does the same thing, but without us knowing the tumor.
You don't hate the guy who like raped 10 kids. I mean, I kind of do. I mean, I may like find myself hating them, but like if any kind of reflection, and even sometimes there might be marginal cases of less severity where like I actually just don't, even if it's something like kind of bad that someone did. I mean, again, the examples are pretty horrific what we're describing, so it's hard to like not, but I can find someone who did something wrong and just view them objectively.
Do you hate the event?
Okay. Me? Yeah.
I'm asking Giffen.
No, I don't hate.
You don't hate the event?
I mean, it depends what you mean by hate. Like, I have a deep disgust with the event. I have a horrible response. It's like
Sounds
I
like
just kind of like
me.
almost look away. Say again.
Sounds like hate to me. I mean, it's like
yeah, well,
terrible.
But this like this
Is that
wasn't
really
even
what
the point I'm
hatred is?
going
I
for.
think
Like,
That,
hatred
that's
is-
not
yeah,
hatred.
like
Yeah,
okay,
it's
like
not
this wasn't
Yeah,
the point I'm going for though. Hang on one second
Yeah.
though,
Okay.
because like the thing is like I'm saying that like it's a lot in a lot of these situations it's like a black box, and you know like once you discover what's in the box, it's like the mystery is gone, and you can just you know adopt a purely objective attitude
You
towards
don't
some of
even
these
need
people.
to do
Well,
the
hang on,
black
please,
box.
please.
Of course,
I have to finish this
Of
point.
course, of course.
But I just wonder, like, you know, for like an emotion like hate, I don't know why necessarily like other emotions can be somehow salvaged, like emotions like love in that case, where you know, maybe you knew, you know, there was um some sort of brain tumor that was causing, you know, your wife to love you. I mean, like, would that suddenly like change your perspective on, like, you know, um, like the love that you
I mean,
felt from your
personally, like
wife?
that would feel weird, right? But at the same time, upon reflection, there really isn't a difference between like the tumor and just like the normal brain chemistry and environment that they've gone through in life, right? Both just happen to have resulted in like the strong bond we feel, right? I mean, they're intangibly like you can imagine in the one instance, you can, like, I would be like, they might take this brain tumor out to save her life, and then that she might not love me anymore, which is like a future concern that would not be present in the other case, right? It's like I'm not concerned that they're gonna like someone's gonna randomly come in and just like alter her brain chemistry to not love me. So that's like a tangible difference. But like in both cases, like she loved me just circumstantially.
Yeah, okay, so
That's
but
it.
like so say you knew like all the chemical processes of her brain and
Yeah.
were just like fully aware of those, and you like held
Mm.
those in your head while you tried to engage in
I am
like
the world's most intelligent brain surgeon. I'm practically superhuman in my understanding of the brain chemistry.
sure,
right.
and you know you pretty much know exactly like
Yeah.
why she behaved, but you also but it's not that you know just know that, but you like hold that consciously too.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't think that's going to affect like the love in the relationship?
Not necessarily.
I don't know how
Would.
I don't know how it couldn't.
Well,
I don't
in
know.
this case, it's like the difference would be kind of like the impression because you're changing from a baseline of reactive attitude to the objective. So like if I'm like starting to like consciously become aware, you know, over time, like the full like grasp of the, you know, illusions fading away, right? Like that would feel different, but like you could still be in a state where you have just like deeply internalized this even before you met, and you still feel like strong bonds, right? You can imagine the scenario where like the entire relationship happened after he was already aware of everyone's brain chemistry. It was a baseline already, so it was nothing new. But you know, you go through, you feel the same emotions when you like interact and you know physically touch and just like emotionally discuss things. All of that can be still there, right? And I don't know if that captures your definition of love or not, or if you defined love specifically including the view of them as if they were an agent. But to me,
Yeah.
there's a basically the entirety of it is captured except for the kind of view of the agency.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think like once you bring in like that strong mechanistic sense and then just hold it constantly with regard to someone, I think
At that point, you wouldn't even be aware that that was like even a difference. Like, if this is just some uber smart person, they may have like fully transitioned to like this new understanding at like age 10. He may even have no memory of like what it was like to kind of view the other people as an agent, but just like all of those same emotions that I described and like the interaction and like the deep bond is still basically there. It's just that he doesn't have some like internalized sense of agency pre-described that he has to overcome now. He already.
so do you think like human interactions would be like we wouldn't lose anything if say we all walked around and like our heads were virtually transparent and you could see everything like working, you know, and
Yeah.
it
Some
was
diorama of a
it-
choo-choo train.
it just
like,
became
moving
more than
switches.
obvious. You
Yeah.
don't even have to hold it in your mind anymore. You could just see it. We were just robots walking around.
Yeah.
Like you could see it.
Sure.
Like that wouldn't change
it would change. It would not be removed. It would what was the term you used? You wouldn't lose anything. It would simply change.
You wouldn't lose anything. Okay, I think I just disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just. I think we
I
just
can
have
imagine an
fundamentally different
incredibly
intuitions.
rich interaction between people who just like, for whatever anomalous reason or environmental programming, on none of them have this like internalized view of other people as like agents, but still hold like the understanding of like the deep complexity, and they still have, they go play badminton, they experience the emotions of like joy and laughter and sadness and like disappointment, all of these things that we kind of would associate with like the bond can all still be there. Like I don't like you're imagining people like almost like drifting around, like you said, like robots, but we already are like robots. So it's like you can describe it as being robotic, but
we don't view each other as robots, though.
We certainly do sometimes, and sometimes we do
sometimes.
It without cognitive
Sure.
Yeah, and not all the time. We don't always view each other as robots.
Can change, right? We already are capable of it clearly, and if the proportion changed, it would be a different world. But I don't think it would be anything lost, unless you like definitionally there would be that no impression of the other people's agent. That's like a definitional difference.
Yeah, I think we're just at a stalemate at this point because I share the intuition that something would be lost, and if you think that something wouldn't be lost, I think the only way
yeah.
I'm just saying, I think the only way to actually adjudicate that would be to somehow, I mean, this like goes back to like the experience machine, but you'd actually have to live out both of those lives and actually just see if anything was lost or not. I don't know. I mean, I think we should wrap it up at this point because we've been going for like 2.5 hours. But yeah, I mean, I think the way that like, just to summarize the way I'm viewing this debate is theoretically it's true that, there's a difference in constitution between people and something like a toy truck or something. There's a difference in complexity and function and all of these different ways. But I guess I agree with Adam, that something would be lost if you viewed humans as just very complicated versions of a toy. And what's interesting is that, I mean, just to wrap it up with like a little bit of like, just kind of summary. The funny thing is that I mentioned Summers has reneged on this paper, actually. He actually jokingly kind of talks about his early work now as something he just wholeheartedly disagrees with. He's shifted his views to basically the same stance as Adam and I take, that this would be to actually lose something very fundamental, and that he was mistaken in his earlier work, which is funny because a lot of people like, oh no, actually early Summers was right. Like it wouldn't actually be that big of a loss. But all right, I think that this was a good paper to jump back into the series with, and I don't know what we'll be doing next time, but we're definitely going to be continuing the series. So I hope you found this interesting and valuable, and tune in next time.